So moved.
Second.
Seconded. Any amendments to the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda as drafted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Next is approval of consent agenda.
I move.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Anything anybody would like to highlight in the consent?
A slight correction on line 193.
Select board meeting minutes?
Pardon me?
Select board meeting minutes?
Yes.
Yep.
On, it says planet change, it should be climate change. What's that?
Climate change is also a serious issue. Yeah, that sounds like a correct. Right?
The select board is one word. What else? Anything else?
No.
I would just make a point to point out the community health engagement meetings. The one in Middlebury, I was just adding it to my calendar, is Tuesday, July 30th at the library from 6 to 7:30. And as that is a frequent driver in our annual budget, it might be worth going.
I think that the recommendations have been published at this point, and one of them has to do with provision of ambulatory services. So there's some intersection there as well for us.
We're gonna have somebody.
I'm attending.
You're going to. Okay. A couple grants that are very helpful to us. So, Holiday Road Highway Grant should be able to help. That was on the list on that road anyway, right?
Yep, the culvert will get done this year and paving next year.
Yeah, good. Okay, with a minor change, all in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, I have, the only thing I can't support is the meeting minutes because I wasn't required. Citizen comments. Is there anybody here for something that's, Kevin? I know what you're here for.
I bet all of you do.
I think I have a solution for you that's immediate.
All right,
Oh.
then I'll turn the meeting to you first.
The Printer's Row. Printer's Alley, rather.
Yes,
You can go down through there with an ambulance.
okay,
We're gonna coordinate a test drive on that.
okay. What about a fire truck?
I think of anything other than maybe the ladder truck, but we need to coordinate that, 'cause that would be immediate.
Okay, because I was thinking we're approaching the year mark when the damage hit. So that's why I'm here tonight, I just wanted to find out what the status was before we.
I hypothesized it, and Kathleen observed a
full-size Casella solid waste management truck navigating down Printer's Alley
Okay.
without difficulty.
Okay,
So you can get your garbage picked up now anyways.
that's
Oh.
wonderful.
Well, so that's our
a question,
thesis.
if I may, that would answer the question for the people that live in Marble Works and Maple Street and that. What about from the underpass to the covered bridge, that direction?
Well, if you
If,
get into Marble Works, you could get over to there.
Well, there's a bit of a depression
yeah,
at the end of the underpass where the water flowed through that blocked,
yes,
that crossing to continue up to where Kevin lives.
correct.
Look at that.
Yeah,
Thought I had the solution to that.
no, it was a good idea, Brian. But it's 50%.
Yes.
Okay, now can we address the other 50%? I know that it was been discussed about what the feasibility was of, whether the railroad would allow an emergency over the grade crossing for something. Is there any further status on that?
I think it's at the state, the railroad was amenable to something, but then getting it through all the, I don't know as far as actually building it, what that would, so, we see, I think we should shoot some grades and see how much water we have up there.
There is some depression from the mud works, not as deep as if you're coming from Seymour Street. But there is some.
Right. When it
I don't know if
flooded,
a truck will pass.
to be honest with you, and I think they calculated, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it 9 feet of water that were, was it
That's
under?
down in the underpass.
But-
how much up top if you were to?
You,
plug
that
the-
was where,
plug the,
that was where
western
one
shoulder?
car who attempted to turn and cut across, they couldn't do it. There was that much water pouring through there. And then, of course, then it was pouring down through Lucia Shaw Lane, flooded the police station and took out all of that. So there was a sizable amount of water on that depression, and it's the depression that Fred is referencing, that it's fairly deep.
Maybe the solution is to ask Emily if we have any engineering money to have an engineer just shoot some grades and do a little,
I think that would be cheaper than building a railroad crossing.
well, at least get some idea of what,
Yeah.
you know, get someone with the equipment out there to do a quick survey and just give us a sense of what's possible.
Well, the thing to do is to know how much water, I didn't observe the car, but if the car came flying in there,
I didn't,
different.
from what I was told, it didn't fly in there, it was, and once it hit, that's as far as it went.
yeah.
You know, and I don't wanna be the rusty thorn that keeps hammering at this point, but, you know, it's just, to me, it's a safety issue.
Yeah, sure.
You know, it's a public safety issue for all the residents from that whole thing, and I mean, we all saw yesterday, the day before yesterday's storm, what it did to parts of Stowe, you know, so I don't think we're exactly not gonna ever see this kind of thing again.
I think in the extreme case, we would probably have to do a temporary crossing and coordinate, make sure no trains are coming through. But I think it's probably beyond reasonable to expect that we're gonna build a railroad crossing that's always sitting there. So I'm looking for something that's gonna give us a 99.9% solution.
Quite a few years, the town had a gate,
We don't anymore, Fred, so.
but you could have a similar thing.
No, they shut it down, they didn't wanna deal with it on this last one, you're going off the rails here, buddy. Let's, we're gonna see what we can do on that, the solution with the, Marble Works, going through the Marble Works.
Okay. I mean, I'm just looking for something in an emergency situation. I'm not
I got
looking
it.
for anything that's gonna be everyday activity.
Yeah. As far as building a permanent crossing there that's available for use, that's not happening. They tore that out purposefully when they put in the bridge and rail project, they're not gonna do that. But in that area, the area that the rail company would entertain is a different area.
Okay.
So, but that's.
But is there a feasibility of that? In the sense of for emergency
I'm telling
purposes?
you, I don't think so. That getting the state to support it, design it, and put in crossing that's for a once in 100-year flood is probably not gonna happen if we have a better solution. They're gonna force us to see if there's any other solution, and I think we have a better solution.
Okay. And as residents on the street, can we all be kept informed of what's going on with this? Because neighbors of mine
Just
keep
got it.
asking, but
You just got it. I don't wanna start a special email chain on this. If you work with the town manager and, but we're gonna make sure we can get emergency vehicles down there first. And then, I mean, I've lived here, what, 50 some odd years, and we got that flooded one time in 50 some odd years. So I know it's a possibility, but it was a very unusual situation. And we have roads that are used daily by hundreds of cars that we need to spend money on, and I don't think that we're gonna find outside money to build something for a 1 in 100-year flood.
So, yes, let's get a trial in the works and keep you informed, Kevin.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Anybody else here for something that's not on the agenda? Okay, we're gonna move forward then to request for emergency approval of the rooftop unit replacement at Parks and Rec Center.
Evening.
Evening.
I'll try to be brief since this was a last minute ad. Yeah, in March, we've had, since the building was built, we've had issues with our air exchange system. And it's getting worse and worse as we get warmer and wetter with climate change. So finally in March, the rooftop unit quit. We had it inspected. They thought maybe the heat exchanger was bad, but there were other components that were bad, so they couldn't tell. That was a $3,700 purchase. I opted to do that, not knowing if it needed to be replaced or not. By the time they could get parts and do it, we were out of heating season into cooling season. They couldn't even get to that until fall. So we could fix it in fall and still not know if the RTU unit needs to be replaced. So I asked them to give me an estimate to replace it with cooling, which they did, which is the $63,600. And then I also asked them for a price to replace it in kind with a new unit with no cooling in it. That's $10,000 more expensive. And the reason for that is availability and demand. The combo units are in much more demand. There's more of them on the shelves ready to go, and they sell many more of them than the other ones. So they're a little slower to get and they cost more money. So it only makes sense to do that. And I went to Kathleen as an emergency purchase, given the time frame and not wanting to get into fall and then not knowing where we are and have another 2 months wait time or whatever for an in-kind RTU unit or whatever the case may be. Hopefully I'm making sense. And the other thing that pushed me into this was we had a community member come up who I believe instructs at the gym and is there quite often, and it's important enough to them that they wanted to donate $15,000 towards this. So the whole number, if we were to replace in kind down to what I want to do now with the heating and cooling combination and the discount, saves the town over $24,000. It makes sense to me. And then today, it was not in the packet. I think it got added very late. I put in a proposal for funding that does not affect future capital spending. It just has me rearranging a couple things in the Parks and Rec department, and it's not really a wash, but it's not gonna affect the bottom line of the budget. So Scott is here because he lives it firsthand, hears from the people and is in the gym and stuff. It's just questions to how hot, how humid, how damp. The floors have been getting damp enough that it's a safety issue, especially with camps with younger kids and whatnot, so.
So, sorry, just to clarify what you said, Bill, I don't see it in the packet. Did you email it, Kathleen?
We put it on the website. It's not in the packet. Did you have to refresh?
I'm looking at, yeah, okay. And so basically, we're figuring out how to pay for it by just rearranging things in the budget, just.
And it's only rearranging the court resurfacing timeline, basically. It's not adding anything to it, and it'll get me onto a 7-year schedule with my court resurfacing, which is what I want to do anyways. and I want all the court surface the same year, so nothing falls through the cracks, and, you know, yada yada, so,
You still need a motion authorizing this expenditure, right?
absolutely, yeah.
Quick question. Was there a warranty on this system? How old is this, like 10 years?
It's 2015, I think, is maybe when the building was being built,
Okay,
so.
so it was something they installed?
And it's not warranty, we've had them there numerous times, repairing it, so.
Ross?
Has it been looked at the feasibility of installing a heat pump to take its place here?
I haven't had time to do that, and it's a very large space, we're talking about the gymnasium itself. So, in my mind's eye, saving $24,000 over replacing it now gives me time and money to look at what the next step for that is, since we haven't entered into that conversation yet.
Maybe something that we- at some point when you get, soon as you get a chance, for the future.
Yep, definitely could. And the other thing I didn't mention, I did to Kathleen, but the two corners in the very top of the gym have large glass panels, but they're static. And I wanted to go to Bread Loaf and find out what the possibilities were to put in windows that will open with a mechanical device, which is gonna be expensive because you have to run electric and stuff, but that's another addition that wasn't part of the original design that would help turn the air over in the building, so.
So we've never had cooling in that building, in the gym?
No, and it's always been issues, even back when I got here and Terry was here, she used to complain about it, and we've muddled through with floor fans, doors open, but like I said, as we get warmer and wetter, it's more and more and more of an issue, and now it's failed, so.
And we don't wanna have to have issues with replacing floors and other stuff.
This is sufficient to cool the whole gym?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Yeah, we had the engineer come out and he did a thorough, research on the whole thing. And apparently, the system that we have now was, I guess, supposed to have cooling. It's relatively the same system, but the cooling was never added, and that's well before my time, so.
Yeah, so what it has been is just an air exchange outside to inside with big balloon chutes at the top of the building, and they have been problematic from time to time. And the original RTU unit has also had several roof leaks inside the building.
This 63,000 includes that 15,000 donation?
No,
That
it would,
was on top?
15,000 would be off of that, so that would take it down to 48,600, I think.
But we need an approval for the whole 63
Yes, please.
motion.
Any questions? Pleasure of the board.
So I'll move to approve the proposed purchase order for VHB for the design and installation of an RTU at the town's recreation center for $63,600.
Second.
Seconded, any comments or questions? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll just make one quick comment. We're seeing more and more of this, and department heads, managers, do the best we can in managing things, but we react more than we do anything else. And I think the town has enough assets at some point to look at a position that is focused on building and grounds maintenance. And then they can do preventive maintenance and schedule and capital scheduling and stuff rather than this kind of thing, so, future, so.
I just, the Energy Committee has a budget of like $56,000 for assisting with energy projects and advancing them. And, if things aren't an emergency and you can have a chance to investigate an alternative, there's some money for that.
Yeah, we took advantage of that in the teen center, and I may do that to talk about different kind of heat cooling in the future, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Emily with us? Okay.
Hello.
Hey,
Hi,
Emily.
Hi, Emily.
We
Yes.
can, huh?
Okay. So the first item that we discussed at infrastructure was a Munson Road culvert engineering agreement with Otter Creek Engineering. I had a hydraulic study done on, culvert on the section of Munson Road that runs north-south, and discovered that it's significantly undersized, so, seeking approval to start designing a replacement for that structure that would meet the state standards and federal standards for aquatic habitat and whatnot.
I'll move to approve the proposed contract with Otter Creek Engineering for $20,000 to determine an engineering solution to the Munson Road culvert.
Second?
Questions?
I just note, in the infrastructure committee meeting, Emily noted that the ultimate construction cost of this is in the range of $500,000. Put it on your radar screens. It's a big project, somehow.
Culvert for $500,000?
Is that right, Emily?
Well, I mean, that said, we don't know what design we're going with yet. I think there's not much road elevation to work with, so I think we'll have to get creative with what design we use. What the state recommended was either a box or, a steel arch, but we could also do a pre-stressed concrete plank bridge, something like that. We just have to have the hydraulic capacity. So, I would imagine that it will be $500,000, but that said, there's also the, structure grant funding, which will be, I don't know if we'll be eligible for it in the next cycle. It's typically every 2 to 3 years that, they allocate it to a town, and so we got it last year for the Halliday Road culvert. So we might be able to get it again next year.
So just a reminder, don't let the $500,000 scare you too much, because when we have taken the initiative to get things engineered, that has made grant funding more readily available when we've completed engineering on some of these projects. So while it is scary, but I don't think we're hurting, I don't think it is a bad thing to spend the $20,000 to get an idea of what we need to do there so that we can plan for the future.
I think it also gives us time to be creative with the solution as opposed to in an emergency situation where we wouldn't necessarily have the time to find the best solution. We would be a little more tied to what we could install.
Makes sense. Other questions? Not, that is a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Middle Road North?
The Middle Road North, so we still have, approximately $455,779 left of the ARPA funding that was allocated for highway improvements. It was initially allocated at $761,125, and so a portion of that is going to the Halliday Road culvert, but we have this additional amount still to spend, which has to be under contract by the end of the year. And so in trying to brainstorm locations that would serve the greatest community, I feel like we've heard a lot of concerns regarding Middle Road North with parking issues, sidewalk issues. I know we have 2 culvert issues along that stretch. So it seems like it would be a good use of that funding, and the road surface itself has serious issues. So I think it would be a good use of that funding and would sort of give us flexibility with the funding depending on what we get for results, and putting it out to bid. We could add extra sidewalk or, have that sort of flexibility with it if there's still funding available after it gets designed and engineered. We could also do the bump out for the turning lane, or the turning lane to head south off of Middle Road North, which is a design we already have, but that I would like to incorporate that into this project and sort of just get the whole section of the roadway diamond.
Is there enough space for a turning lane there without doing a lot of road work, or?
There is already a turning lane.
So we already have the turning lane. I don't think it extends quite far enough. Looking from where people are driving, I think the queue extends further back from where it's designed, so we might be able to extend it a little bit. There are some utilities in the way there, but I think there's room to squeeze in a little bit more.
That, turn lane must be only a couple cars long. It's been a long time since I've.
No, it's a few
is-
cars long, but there's a hydrant that prevents it from extending long unless you have to move the hydrant.
The
Oh,
other
okay.
issue with that turning lane is that it was added after the road, and we're not sure of the subsurface of that turning lane, and it could probably use some improvement there. So. I'll move to authorize.
Yeah, the general thought, what's that?
I think we're getting a motion.
I was gonna make a motion. Go ahead, Emily.
Okay, sorry.
You wanna go ahead? No?
Me?
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, the general thought with the turning lane is that we would do some exploratory, coastal digging, just to see what we have for subbase in there. I think some of it does have a decent amount of subbase, but I think some of it just got added on and it might be, lower quality soils.
I'll move to authorize the use of Town of Middlebury ARPA funds to assist the proposed highway infrastructure improvements to Middle Road North.
Second.
Motion seconded. Any questions or comments on this? And would this take in some of the parking concerns? Is that also part of what you're talking about, looking at?
I think we might as well look at it while we're in the engineering phase to see what we can accommodate through there.
Yeah.
I don't know what we'll be able to do. I feel like we could do something though.
Okay.
Sort of the golden opportunity to work on it.
Yep. Okay. Hearing no other questions, all in favor of approving the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. I guess that's it for this evening, Emily. Thank you, unless you have something
Yep,
for us.
thank you all.
Just a quick note while we're talking about infrastructure, no infrastructure meeting in July. The next meeting for infrastructure will be in August. And I don't have the date in front of me. It's not the usual second Thursday, it's the third Thursday, I think.
We were trying to bump it to the 15th, but we need to make sure we have a quorum. I think a few people were not able to make it.
Anyway, so just a reminder to anyone interested that there's no meeting in July.
Okay. And we've got representatives from the state delegation. Nice to see, at least Senator Hardy. Come on
And
forward.
Jubilee.
I think Rex Sheldon is planning on joining, but
Amy
She's, Robin is on.
Yeah, just came in.
Amy Sheldon, Representative Sheldon won't be able to make it.
oh, she's not
tonight,
able to
yes.
make it. Okay. Hi. Should I start or?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
How is everyone? It's nice to see you all again. It feels like deja vu, except for it's summer. I can, how about I start and then I can pass it to you and then Rob. Okay. So I had some specific bills that I wanted to talk to you all about as a follow-up to previous meetings and issues that we've discussed. And also, I think you all have gotten a link to my end of session summary, which has a lot of the bills summarized in it. And if you didn't, I can get it to you.
We just added it to the packet.
Okay,
Yep, it's in the
great.
packet.
So all but one of these bills are included in my summary. The first one I wanted to draw your attention to is S-195, which is in the public safety section of my summary. You'll recall a somewhat uncomfortable meeting that we had in this room last fall about the downtown sort of public safety issues and the crime that was happening and issues that a lot of the businesses were mentioning. And I was attempting, maybe not entirely successfully, to explain the difference between our bail statutes and our conditions of release statutes. And Andy actually asked me to look into conditions of release and if there was a way that we could do some more with the conditions of release statute to make it harder for people who have been arrested to be released and then go recommit a crime. So what happens is a judge creates conditions of release, and that's, as it sounds, like these are the things a person has to do in order to be released from jail after they've been arrested. It's not bail, but it's sort of like a plan. So I did some work on that and introduced a bill along with Senator Collmore down in Rutland because his select board down in Rutland was facing some of the same issues. And the two of us introduced a bill, S-195, that updated and strengthened the conditions of release statutes. So totally bipartisan bill. There was 4 senators, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats on it. And it is, permits increasing bail for repeat offenders. That's one thing it does. It includes the use of a firearm for selling or trafficking drugs as considered a violent act for the purposes of setting bail, so that you can set a higher bail if you do something like that, and sets conditions of release measures for individuals who have failed to comply with previous orders. So if you fail to do it once, your conditions of release continue to get stricter. And then it also creates a pretrial supervision program and a new home detention program. So these are all measures to help prevent people from just being released back into the community and recommitting the same crime, which is kind of what we were seeing here. So this is summarized in my summary, and you can look at the bill and the summary of that. There are links to the actual bill as well. So I just wanted, pardon me?
When does that become effective?
That is a good question. I believe it becomes effective, I think it becomes effective July 1, but let me double check. Yes, oh, no, it became effective on passage, so it's already in effect. So it's in effect. So anyway, I just wanted to update you on that, since that was a rather difficult meeting, and I wanted you to know I followed up on it and indeed passed a bill. Well, not just me, but we all passed the bill. The other thing, and Kathleen and I have been in lots of touch about this one, is the flood relief and recovery. I chair the Government Operations Committee, and we did a major bill on flood recovery from a perspective of government operations, and that includes state and local government operations. The bill updates a lot of statutes around wastewater and just clarifies them, and stormwater. It doesn't make a lot of changes in that area, but it hopefully makes the statutes clearer, so that if you're trying to figure out what you can do, the statutes are clearer. It created the Swiftwater Rescue Team at the state level, codified it and provided funding for it, which is the thing that oversees the Swiftwater Rescue Teams around the state, which were utilized here in Middlebury and saved a number of lives when we had the bad storm in the early August. It also creates a community resilience and disaster mitigation grant program that does have funding in it. So Kathleen, you should look out for that, because that is grants for you all can apply to and use to update infrastructure to make it more flood resilient. So some of the projects that you might be looking at, Heather, could be relevant for this grant program. And there is funding in it. A lot of it is ARPA funds that we're trying to use at the state level, ARPA funds. And it does also create a lot of planning and sort of preparation. It includes a lot about first responders. It's a very long bill. But the most relevant and specific thing to Middlebury is in the budget adjustment bill, there was money provided to all of the communities that were flooded in July. And I repeatedly asked on the Senate floor, hey, what about the communities flooded in August? And so I got in this bill, and then eventually was put in the budget, funding for communities that were flooded in August and December. And this is state money that you all can use as your local match to the FEMA funds that you're getting for flood relief. So Middlebury should get a significant amount. I don't know if you've heard yet the number, but I can get that for you if you haven't gotten it yet. But it should be a fairly significant amount. And I repeatedly was like, how about August? How about, so making sure taking care of the Addison County communities, not just Middlebury, but also Ripton and Hancock had significant flooding. So another thing that Andy asked me about was speed traffic cameras. And we did pass a bill, S184, that created a pilot program for automated traffic law enforcement, or ATL. It is a pilot program, and it's specifically for highway construction zones. That was the sort of narrow thing that people could get behind. The Agency of Transportation and the state police had concerns about it, but they agreed that this was the sort of narrow pilot that they could support. So that will go into effect this year, I believe, and we'll see how it works. And this is to use automatic cameras for catching people speeding in construction zones on the highway. And we'll see if it works and there aren't problems, maybe we can expand it, but just wanted you to know.
Thanks.
S220 is the library bill. I know libraries have been a big topic of conversation. You all know I love libraries, so I sponsored a bill on libraries. It includes provisions about the freedom to read, so that people can't ban books from libraries, or that there's a process for if somebody does want to ban a book, there's a process that libraries need to go through. And it updates the municipal statutes about oversight of libraries. I don't think it will impact Middlebury because I think you have a fairly clear structure, but there were some towns where there was a lot of question about who actually supervises the library, the director of the library. Is it the library board or the select board? In a lot of towns, it was not clear, so we clarified that to make sure that towns knew, and more importantly, that library directors knew who their bosses were. And then two other bills that probably you've heard about from the VLCT. One is the update to the open meeting law, sort of the post-COVID update to the open meeting law, and we took tons of testimony on this from towns large and small across the state to update it. And the final version does not, you may have heard that we were considering requiring hybrid meetings like you all do. We backed off on that, and so they're not required. There is a provision for people to request access if they need it, like members of the public. But I think for y'all, it's not gonna have any impact because you already are pretty much the gold standard for open meeting laws. In fact, you could do training for other towns. So I don't think you'll have to worry about it, but it should be on your radar and look at it to make sure you're complying. Yeah, oh, sorry.
Question about that, is okay. It divides, the requirements for this into boards that are advisory versus those that are legislative and have
Yep.
budget authority.
Yep.
So this takes effect July 1st, so it's like, we need to know what we need to do.
Yep.
We already do this for the select board, the infrastructure committee, but say the energy committee, for example, has a $56,000 budget, has some budget authority. Is that a committee that the legislative intent said should be required to have its meetings recorded and kept, or the planning commission that has a pre-legislative role in adopting planning and zoning? Is that a committee that the legislative intent thought should have its meetings recorded?
That is a great question, and so you're right, we divided it up into 4, and there's a chart that I can send you that I think the VLCT links to in their information that I actually created, that shows state level boards and local level boards, advisory versus non-advisory. So at the municipal level, during our conversations, we often used a lot of examples because a number of us had served at the local level, and energy committees would be advisory. So they don't set their own budget, you all set their budget. So the select board sets the energy committee's budget. They don't have the authority to increase or decrease their budget. They don't have the
Well,
authority.
they can expend from it, but they do.
They can spend, but they can't set
Okay,
their
that's good to
budget.
know.
They can't raise taxes. They can't create policies, ordinances, or anything. So they're an advisory. They advise you. So they're advisory to the select board. The planning commission is not advisory. They have a role of creating, policy and ordinances. Their plan ultimately has to be approved, but I think we considered them to be non-advisory. And but you should really talk to your town attorney and I'm not an attorney. I can tell you what the legislative intent is, but there are a lot of people who will weigh in on what the law is now that it's passed. I think what we found is most boards actually are advisory. Most boards don't have the role of setting. If you're non-advisory, you have to be able to either create a budget, set the budget, raise taxes or revenue of some kind, set fees and taxes, create policy, or have a quasi-judicial role. So you all have all of those things. So you're clearly non-advisory, but the Energy Committee really doesn't have any of those roles. Neither does Parks and Rec Committee, or the Infrastructure Committee or anything like that. They're all advisory to the Select Board.
So this is something that David Sofrin has been following and working with our staff and boards on. So
Yeah. So, based on what I've seen on your work, you are already in compliance with for the most part, and there might be a couple little things that you need to tweak, but the other bill that you probably heard about from VLCT, and they ultimately were supportive of S55. They worked really closely with us on making sure S55 was something that big and small towns could follow. The last one is S875, which is the Municipal Ethics Code bill. And VLCT was just honestly didn't love it at the end. They liked it better at the end than they did at the beginning, but they still didn't love it. The H75 is a big sort of refresh of the state ethics code, which is the ethics code that all state employees and state officials have to follow, including Rep. McGill and I, and then it creates a municipal ethics code. Again, I think Middlebury won't have a hard time with this because of the size and the sort of sophistication of your staff. It does require towns to have a point person that is the person that if somebody has an ethics complaint they want to make would be the recipient of the ethics complaint. You already are required by law to have a conflict of interest policy, and this just creates a conflict of interest policy that is the same for all municipalities. So right now, conflict of interest policies could be variable, and this creates one that everybody follows. And it also creates a misuse of office policy, so you know that you can't abuse your office as a elected official. That's the ethics code, and then you have to create a process for receiving complaints and dealing with complaints if there are any ethics complaints, and which is the same thing that happens at the state level. There also originally in the bill was a pretty broad whistleblower protection provision. We narrowed that significantly in the Senate, and it's now just a whistleblower protection for municipal employees that mirrors the whistleblower protection for state employees. So your employees would have the same protections that anybody who works for the state has, but it's just for employees. Originally, it was for any member of the public, which seemed extremely broad, so now it's tied to employment law. So those were the bills that I wanted to highlight because they're specific to select board work and then things to follow up on work we've done, but I'm happy to answer questions on anything else. And
Is there mandatory training or anything that goes along with the municipal ethics?
yeah, there's training for both the open meeting law and the ethics code. The open meeting law is required training for all non-advisory boards, so you'll have to do it. I think you already do it as part of your annual like VLCT training. And then for the ethics bill, there is training for certain people. And I think select boards are all included, and town managers and some town employees, like if they head a department, so the police chief, the heads of department heads. And then, yeah, so it's listed in the law specifically who has to take the training. But I mean, I think ethics training is probably good for everyone if you can do it.
Sure.
But
Yeah, as long as it's provided easily and cheaply.
yeah, and that goes into the ethics, the municipal ethics code goes into effect January 1st. So you have some time to create your procedures, to create, to designate the person who's in charge. And then there's an annual reporting, so the town has to report up to the ethics board if they had any complaints and what happened with them. But everything's confidential, while it's happening. So if somebody makes a complaint, it's not public until, yeah.
So along with all the conversations we had about potential legislation, we also discussed potentially looking at regionalization, and maybe strengthening some things or moving them to a super municipal level. I didn't hear much about that getting traction this year. But
It did, in
it
fact,
did?
yes.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
thank you for mentioning that. We passed a bill on it for creating a 2-year study of county and regional government.
Yeah.
And actually, it's co-chaired by the government operations co-chair, so I'm one of the co-chairs. And it's a bipartisan legislative committee, and then there's a technical advisory group that is made up of sort of other stakeholders. There were so many of them, we were starting to get like a 30-person committee, so we created a smaller committee and then a technical advisory group. So the VLCT has seats on that technical advisory group. The regional planning commissions do, school boards association, other, regional, the chambers of commerce, all the sort of entities you might imagine, have seats on the technical advisory. It starts in September.
Cool.
And we're really hoping to dig into, is it possible to strengthen county government or regional government in some way and sort of take some of the burden off some of the, particularly the smaller municipalities. So, yes, thank you for asking.
What's the enabling legislation? Do you know the number?
It is, I should have this
Sorry.
memorized, no, because it was my bill, S-169, I think. I will look it up. It's not a very sexy bill, so I didn't include
Sure
it in
not.
my, I mean, it's like a study committee. So, I didn't include it in my summary, but I'm so excited that you're interested, Andy.
Very, very excited. Oh, that's great. Thanks so much, Senator Hurd.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Emma.
I'm Jubilee McGill. I'm on the House Human Services Committee. It's nice that she covered all her gov ops, because usually we come to these things, and she's also in the Senate Health and Welfare, so we see all the same bills. So we cover most of the Agency of Human Services, except for the Department of Health. We kind of share that with the Healthcare Committee. We cover the public health aspects of the Department of Health. So I'll start with, so ours aren't like very specific to Middlebury, but really kind of the bills we do, Vermonters on a whole. We have S25, which is the PFAS bill. Came out of the Senate last year, and we took it up this year. And that one bans PFAS in a lot of personal products, and along with some other chemicals. We tied it to what other states are doing. Vermont, we're so small that we can't really, force manufacturers' behavior. But when we work with these other states who have a lot more buying power, that becomes possible. So collectively, it's the most wide sweeping kind of chemical bill, and that was tripartisan support for this bill. Then S-186 is a recovery residences bill. Danielle, the executive director of Turning Point, was very involved with this, and she came and testified. I know having a recovery residence in Addison County is really important. We really need one here, and I know she's been trying to make it happen, and so this will help with that challenge a bit. One of the kind of contentious issues is how we deal with folks who are struggling with their sobriety when they're in recovery residence. That can threaten the sobriety of everyone else in the home. So this bill kind of comes up with some processes. There's a task force and covers some certification. But so hopefully this is another step towards having a recovery residence option for folks in Addison County to really be on that long-term path to recovery. Folks often, they get out of rehab and then they often have no other option but to go back to the same exact living situation they were in before. And so this gives them a path to long-term sobriety. S-302, this one actually, I heard from a lot of folks in Middlebury actually about it. I was kind of surprised. It's one of those ones not very sexy. It's a dementia outreach public health bill. We've made great strides in the treatment of dementia. Folks after being diagnosed can live a lot longer and really been able to slow down the progression of the illness. The issue is a lot of people aren't being diagnosed until it's too late for these medicines to have an effect. So this is kind of directs the Department of Health to engage in a public health campaign, to work with doctors, and really make sure that people are getting screened early so we can catch the disease in its initial stages and have better outcomes and longer outcomes. And then H661, again, not a very sexy bill. We deal with a lot of hard bills, but this is it's about child abuse and neglect, investigations and substantiations. And yeah, it was a lot of hard testimony, but it was a really cool bill because we had the administration and we also had parent advocates and legal aid and everyone really coming together to update the statute and really just reimagine the system. Right now, it creates tiers. You could be, young and in a stressful situation and make a really bad mistake, and that can really ruin your whole life. It ruins your ability to get housing. It ruins your ability to get employment, to be part of your children's lives. And so this really allows people to change and to get help and not have it affect them while also still protecting children. Want to add anything?
Yeah, it's the child abuse registry,
Yes,
which
yes.
is what Jubilee's talking about. And right now, Vermont has a much higher percentage of people on the child abuse registry than other states. And there was a lot of work done to look at whether the right people for the right reasons are getting on the child abuse registry, because as Jubilee said, the stakes are really high if you get on it. You can't even chaperone a field trip. So this bill really looked at revamping those statutes to make it more consistent with what other states have. so that the people who are on the register are really people who should be, and people who shouldn't be aren't on it.
There was a lot of disparities around Vermont and how things were enforced, equity issues. I know that all of the, every substantiation that's ever been challenged was overturned because of the way things were done. So really, hopefully this will protect children and families going forward. And then I'll just talk about some budget items. Talked about kind of that difficult meeting last fall around homelessness. We, starting July 1st, there was going to be a cap on the number of nights that a household can have per year. So that it's 80 nights per year outside of adverse weather conditions, and those are December 1st to March 31st. And then those don't count towards their 80 days. But otherwise, households are going to have to make some decisions if they don't have housing on how they use those dates. So I mention it just because we may see a higher population, higher number of unsheltered people around the state, or we will see, and that may have an impact in Middlebury and Addison County. We also, I'll use this as did Robin hop off?
No, she's just,
She's in the panel.
doesn't have the video.
I'll let her segue into the actual numbers. We also, on that note, we also invested a lot of money, additional money into providing supports. I know HOP grants applications are being reviewed right now. In my other job, I was on a meeting today with the person who's doing all of that, and she had been up very late. So that we should see significant money coming into our service agencies in Addison County. There's additional money to funds to build additional shelters and permanent supportive housing for folks who struggle in traditional permanent housing. We'll have more options for long-term housing with supports built in. And so I don't know, Robin, if you want to segue in, or if I don't know if you have questions.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can just go back to the PFAS. So that subject comes up when we are talking about wastewater often.
Yeah, absolutely.
Has there been any work on the legislator? So we're concerned obviously about how we're applying our biosolids and PFAS. Has there any work been done on that? Any changes within the state to that?
That wasn't part of this bill. This was more about consumer products. But
Okay.
there was a bill, I think a couple of years ago, about the biosolids and preventing them from being spread on farm fields. And I think
There was a member did introduce on the House side. It unfortunately, I don't think went anywhere, and that rep is not running again. But I know, myself included, we plan to introduce a bill that's similar and looks at that and how we support municipalities.
So that would be something that would be pretty important too, because we are land applying biosolids in the town of Middlebury, and it does keep the process affordable for us. If we have to change and start landfilling biosolids, that does have a significant impact in this community. So if you could keep us abreast on where the state is moving and on that subject.
Yeah, it's come up multiple times, but we didn't do anything this session on it.
Yep.
But I'm sure you heard about what just happened in South Burlington, and now they're
I didn't.
Oh, there was at the Air National Guard site, there was a release of PFAS because of, I think, was it their sprinkler system went off by mistake?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it drained into the South Burlington wastewater treatment facility, and they noticed it, and it's a significant amount of PFAS. Yeah. So,
800 gallons, I think.
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, we're also looking at in current engineering on a wastewater plant upgrade, and also need to keep that any changes to state regulations in mind as well. So.
That's another thing you could use that grant program for.
Don't worry, I have plenty of opportunities to, to take advantage of grant money. Or we do, as the town, we do, so. Remember with that culvert?
Yeah.
Robin, give you a shot here?
Sure, can you see me or?
I can.
Yes.
That's really interesting, okay. Hello, thank you so much for having us. I appreciate this and appreciate the relationship we have with the select board in the town of Middlebury. It's great. The reason I'm here, for those of you who don't know, is I'm actually in Portland, Maine, babysitting grandchildren. My 4-year-old may be walking by, brushing his teeth with his grandfather momentarily, so that come through my room to do that. But anyway, so I did not bring my entire budget book. So I am the vice chair of the House Appropriations Committee, which means we do the budget for the state of Vermont. And we also, every bill that has any money, any appropriation, no matter how small, even if it's $50, it comes to our committee. So I have seen a lot of bills, not expert on all those bills, but but at least have some something. And even though the yield bill doesn't come through my committee, the education and finance bill, I spent 2 years on Ways and Means, and I'm fairly well versed in that. And so if there's questions you want to hear about that, we can talk a little bit about that. And I know that Senator Hardy also has a lot of expertise in that area, so we can talk about that. Otherwise, just to let you know about the budget, from a big picture standpoint, the general fund money, which is really the taxpayer money that comes in to help fund the budget, is actually down $223 million from the FY24 budget adjustment. So it's a smaller budget than it was last year. So it's the general fund dollars were $2.4 billion in FY24 as adjusted as a budget adjustment, and now it's about $2.2 billion. I'm rounding here, but so it's a little bit less than it was last year. Federal funds are down $96 million, which is separate money from the ARPA funding that we have been getting as a result of COVID. But our total budget last year was about $8.7 billion, and this year it's $8.57 billion all told. So we, for many legislators who were elected during COVID and beyond, this is the first year they have experienced doing a budget without all the COVID and federal money coming in that we've had, where we've been saying, well, how do we want to spend it? Here's 10 million, here's 100 million, and whatever. We don't have that anymore. And it was kind of a shock for a number of legislators this year. But we always balance the budget, and we did so again this year. Some of the places that we spent our money, housing, Representative McGill has already talked a bit about that. Housing continues to be a high priority. We know that from a workforce standpoint. We know that from a homeless standpoint. People who are trying to transition out of being in prison and don't have a place to go, and it's a lot more expensive to keep them in one of our correctional facilities and in transitional housing. We need all kinds of housing. We want people to move here and get jobs. We need housing. So we have tried to. We put over $1 billion into housing since 2020, and this year it's a lot less because we didn't have all that federal money, but we have spent quite a bit of money on housing and continue to have it as a priority. Social services and mental health needs are still great, and we are so lucky in Madison County to have CSAC, the Counseling Service of Madison County, right in Middlebury. I'm so grateful for that organization. They work so hard, and many of them get paid more working at Dunkin' Donuts, and they still stay there. And so we do our best every year to try to do rate increases so that people can afford to be working there and stay there and offer us the help that so many community members need. One of the exciting parts of the budget this year was we finally found a home for Vermont Access Network, which is Middlebury Community Television. It is one of the stations. They're now under the offices of the Secretary of State's office. We found a funding source. They got $1 million. They're not going to be coming every year saying, please help us out or we won't survive. We think we had that one sort of figured out. So that was pretty exciting. Yay, thank you, NCTV. If you're there. One of the other issues has been around public safety and the judiciary. We have a backlog of over 16,000 cases because of COVID, and so we put a lot of money into judiciary for additional positions, for restorative justice, and all kinds of things around that, and Department of Public Safety as well, to try to catch up with this backlog. If we did nothing, it would, I think I heard if we did nothing, it would be like 59 years or some crazy number before we'd ever catch up, which means we'd never catch up. So we're really trying to get a handle on that. And one of the things we know, I think there was some talk about, you know, issues with whether it's theft or, you know, issues that we have with folks breaking the law. If the time between the law is broken and the consequences for breaking the law is so great, there's no, it's really not like a punishment, and people can continue to do bad things without having that consequence be closer in terms of cause and effect. So this will help with that, and we hope will reduce crime and some of the issues that we've had. We've also put money, continue to put money into workforce programs. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country, and we are filling jobs. I just saw a jobs report today, and we are doing that, but we have a number of tuition benefit programs to help people in the trades. We know we need people in all kinds of trades around Vermont, plumbing, electric, construction, all kinds of things. So we have tuition benefit for that, for nursing, other critical occupations. We have 1.3 million National Guard tuition benefit to support those folks. So we try to cover a broad range of things in that. On the one-time money, we are continuing to give money for matching for FEMA, for flood hazard mitigation grants, for things around water quality. We try to use our one-time money for one-time expenses, which means projects, not ongoing things. So a lot related to flooding, climate resilience, community resilience and disaster mitigation, dam safety, those kinds of things we try to address. And then finally, I've talked a little bit about the COVID money, the ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act money. I also sit on the Joint Fiscal Committee, which meets in the off session, and we have the authority to spend money or move money around if we need to in the off session. And we are also tasked with overseeing the oversight of the ARPA funds. You know, we got billions of dollars to come into the state of federal money, and all of the ARPA money has to be obligated by December of this year, and it has to be expended by December of 2026. So if we wait till December and say, oops, that program isn't going to work, and then we have to give that money. It could be a couple million, it could be 10 million, whatever. So we're keeping track on a pretty regular basis. There's a Chief Recovery Officer, Douglas Farnham, who's overseeing that. The spreadsheets are the size of your table. We spend a lot of time looking at those things and really being sure. And the administration has the same goal we have, which is not to leave any money on the table and just to use all this money. So we'll be having a Joint Fiscal Committee meeting in July, and again in September, and again in November, and we'll be checking in each of those points along the way to ensure that the money, if it isn't likely to be spent where it was originally intended, that we re-obligate it somewhere else. And we have the authority to do that, so we don't have to wait for the next session. And that's a pretty important thing that we have. So that's really what I have to talk to you about. If you have any questions, or I guess one of the other things we did, the revenue is still coming in really well to the state of Vermont. So that, you know, federal funds aside, personal income tax is up, corporate income taxes are up, all of those things. And as a result of that, we were able to appropriate $25 million to the Ed Fund. And the result of that was to bring down taxes by about 2 cents or 2.5 cents. It's about 1 penny is about 10 million. So that was a one-time thing. And we're really trying to be careful about the more we use one-time money, and until we solve the education funding problem, if we do this, there's a cliff for the next year. So we can't keep putting it off. We have to solve the problem. This has been many years and decades in the making. It's not going to happen overnight. There's already people working on it. We have a commission to look at both the future of public education as well as the education cost drivers and what we can do for cost containment. So we're looking at both of those pieces. And
were voted down as part of the signal that people were ready for a change?
Yes, and I had some colleagues, go to their meetings at town meeting, and they would come back, and I know one of them said to me, I asked the people at this town, I said, do you think you're finally ready to look at things that you weren't ready to look at before? And they all looked at them and they said, yes, yeah, we're ready now. So, that's good news. It's hard to get to that place.
Anybody have any questions of our legislators?
Thank you for your work.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for making the time to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Put in a plug, there was a report that just came out around healthcare or hospital systems. Was not great. Just July 30th, the Green Mountain Care Board, so just making sure, awesome,
At
yes.
the library, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Folks, be there.
Yeah, I mentioned that it's in our consent agenda tonight, so.
Oh, perfect.
That's
Yeah.
it's gonna be an important, it's
Yeah.
as big as the education crisis is that,
Both
so,
of those are pretty big
yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
I
impediments to people, young families trying to set roots here in the state.
yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely will be one of my focuses next year is the healthcare stuff, because I'm on the healthcare committee, if I'm back. S-159 is
Yeah,
the
I
county
found
health.
it too, thanks.
Yeah. I'm glad you're excited. We'll have to have
can
coffee.
get it
Thanks
faster.
so much
Yeah,
for joining us. You know you can always reach us if you have any questions anytime. I think Kathleen can reaches out to us and we to her, but any of you, please don't hesitate.
Well, for the three of you to make the time this evening to come in and walk us through the changes and just to spend time collaborating in some respect with the local officials, we really do appreciate it. So, thanks for everything
Thank
you're
you.
doing.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, yeah, Ruth.
Next on the agenda is St. Stephen's Church, Mont Gas easement request.
We're back.
The word close. Mine's blue, yours looks,
Black. Close.
yeah. Good evening. It's a former chair,
Yes,
That's
uniform.
Okay. Want us to start?
please.
Okay. We are requesting an easement for the town for Vermont Gas to cross the town green to St. Stephen's. And we are at a kind of a crossroads with the church, 200-year-old church, that the town granted the place on the spot on the green. We do not own any other land. We don't own that land. We are there at the mercy of the town back 200 years ago. We are investigating and trying to figure out how to deal with our energy situation as well as other issues with the church. Several years ago, we invested $50,000 into the Acorn Solar Farm in Bristol to try to mitigate some of the costs of our energy bills, and much of our electricity is paid for with that. We explored putting solar panels on our historic roof, and it has been deemed that the roof is not strong enough to hold solar panels on top of the slate. We have heat pumps installed in the 1997 wings, the addition, and we looked into doing heat pumps in the main nave area, the main church, and the church it's too big. It's too big of a space, and that is a common thing for buildings of this sort. So this is not an unusual situation. It happens that our oil burners are less than efficient and are nearing the end of their lives, and we are in a situation where we will either have to replace them with oil, continue to do that, or in this case, asking to go with Vermont Gas, so that in that regard, we would be saving about $10,000 a year in fuel costs, and it has been estimated that we would save carbon reduction of over $30,000 a year, and that's in this year's terms. We are also looking to mitigate some of the energy inefficiency by bolstering up our foundation, which is in very bad shape. The water comes through there, and so we are going to be putting shotcrete on that, and also doing anything that we can in insulating the basement as well as insulating the roof. So we are looking to upgrade our electricity, our lighting services in the church itself, and to make the envelope overall tighter, including the pointing of windows and things like that. So we are at a situation where there is no good answer as far as today's energy situation, but we need an answer. And so right now it comes down between, do we go with oil and have a more expensive thing, it's still a fossil fuel and worse for the environment, or do we go with natural gas? So that's the crux of why we are here, asking if we could have an easement across the town green. John?
Very good. When I first came to Middlebury in 1970, we had a landscape where coal was still a dominant fuel. Fuel oil was used. We moved through periods where propane became more available and efficient. We moved into different efforts of electric heating, some resistance heating, then radiant heating on off-peak grid times to try to make better use of the power available. And in the last decade or more, natural gas became available to us, and the town took advantage of that opportunity to bring natural gas here. And in that time, the gas has become a mainstay for appropriate applications in the town. Many of those are tax-supported entities. Among them, Porter Hospital, Mary Hogan Schools, MUMS, Middlebury Union High School, Hannaford Career Center, the Middlebury Police Station, Middlebury Rescue, several sewage pumping stations, and nonprofit housing applications of Middlebury Housing Associates and Evernorth Housing, among them, are all on natural gas service now. And all of those instances are ones where good efficient use is saving taxpayer dollars because it's cutting the costs of operations for all of those properties. Churches that are also enrolled with the gas, Middlebury Congregational Church, St. Mary's, and then in business, the industrial park throughout is a heavy user, and the businesses on Exchange Street, I know some of those, are well using it too, and in town, National Bank of Middlebury, for one, a prominent one using it. And of course, at Middlebury College, they're on a program of, while they're trying to cut their carbon, they're changing over perhaps 10 buildings a year to natural gas. So we have a situation where, as time goes along, we have seen and will see that the best selection of fuels, technologies, building science, and so forth will be ever-changing and ever improving. But today, the natural gas is serving us well. When we instituted the opportunity to bring the natural gas in, this is what we hoped for. And it is performing in the way that we aimed at that time. It is helping us keep jobs. It's helping businesses be more secure and solvent and stay in our community where they might not be able to do that. So this is today. We're not trying to solve all the problems of the world. We're trying to do the best job we can for this Middlebury usage, and it's an appropriate use, given the alternatives that we have in play. We don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the good. We know that we will find other alternatives going forward, and they will begin to emerge more so than they do today. But it's going to be a good long time, many years, before we move on past natural gas. We have not even moved past the use of coal. So really, this has got a long way to go. So we ask your support in having the church take advantage of this opportunity and continue its good work in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone from Vermont Gas here?
I don't believe so.
So this is the first time I think we've negotiated one of these easement agreements without a member of Vermont Gas here, and I do find that interesting.
I did not encourage them to come.
Okay,
And the reason I did not encourage them to come is I don't want to get into a larger debate on global warming and how the world deals with energy needs and so forth. That's not the issue here. The issue here is a supply line across the green to meet the needs of the church.
but the agreement is between the town of Middlebury and Vermont Gas.
That's correct.
And we do need to, I think, as a board, separate who the gas line is servicing and treat all requests for utility access across public land the same, regardless of who the end user is. And please let me finish.
Yeah, sorry.
I think it was very beneficial for you to not ask Vermont Gas to come, and I understand your reasoning why. And I think it very interesting that you both are here, very prominent, important members of our community, to ask for this easement. I find that very interesting. And I think I want to separate the subject of who the gas line is for from the question, if we could, please. Because we had a situation similar to this that did not involve such a prominent member of our community, and we made a decision in that situation that I think we should uphold in all future decisions. And that was that we asked Vermont Gas to pay for easements across public access, which is, I think, what the issue came before the board last time.
When was that one?
The stone mill.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think we were leaning towards giving them
We were leaning
access.
towards asking them to pay us, and they rerouted the line.
No, I don't think we voted to have them pay us.
I don't think we got that far, because
No,
the
'cause
question
I
was,
I
the
not
vote
in
was
favor
questioned.
Of having them pay us. So I remember we were debating that still, and they found another route.
So,
We've
so
given
in,
others access and not had them pay.
right, and it's not about who's connecting to it. And in this case, I feel like we are being swayed by who's connecting to it. And I just would like us to separate that from the situation and treat all requests for public access the same, regardless of who's connecting to it and who is showing up to the meeting and asking for the request. That's all I'm requesting,
Yeah, I get that.
you know.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable request, so that the argument is not about does St. Stephen's deserve it? It's
Right.
about
Right.
where
That's,
it's-
I feel like that's a lot of what we received in our presentation, is that and I'm not saying that you don't, but this is an agreement between us and Vermont Gas and not us and St. Stephen's. And I just want us to not set a precedent that we are making decisions based on our heartstrings and not what is right for the town. So I just would like to make that.
Just in terms, I agree with you. In terms of precedent, you know, when the town select board acted to allow Vermont Gas to use its public rights of way to serve anybody in the community who wanted, needed it, and there's, I don't know how many Vermont Gas users there are in.
Hard to hear you, sir.
I'm sorry. I'll back up. I
Fred,
agree.
sorry, just pull that microphone a little bit closer to you and it may pick your voice up a little better.
Can you hear me now? I agree with Heather in that, in terms of precedent, the town of Middlebury some years ago acted through this board to authorize Vermont Gas to provide gas service to anybody in the community who needed or wanted it. And so there are many hundreds, I don't know how many Vermont Gas customers there are in Middlebury now, but a great many. And the issue of whether our action allows access over a public right-of-way or public land is kind of a distinction without a difference in terms of policy. And it puts the board in a very awkward position, or at least me, to say, well, why should we suddenly, you know, say no? Or should we say, for any fossil fuel, you know, thou shalt not drag the fuel oil hose over town property to fill their tank? Or, you know, at what point do we get with this? And there's been recent information that was provided by the staff of a town meeting that some of people had forgotten about in 2017, where the town voted to authorize Mr. Ups and others in this area to use town land through an easement, and the town voted nearly 2-1 in favor of that. So the precedent is changing the policy just now. Having said all that, it is a very difficult and important challenge to figure out how to advance the town towards transition away from fossil fuels. And the Energy Committee, to its credit, has embarked on things that are helpful. The Energy Navigator project that it's funding, for example, helps people individually. And I think a helping, constructive way forward is better than one that is militant and obstructive, you know, for the next entity. So I spoke about this at the last Energy Committee meeting, and it's very difficult because it's an important issue to make advancement on. And the Energy Committee has money, as I mentioned earlier, that it could use for another opinion if you think a second opinion or additional information would be helpful. But I think the helping mode is the mode we should be in, but not to try to second guess at our level what other kinds of heating systems might be appropriate or not. So that's just my thoughts about it.
No, I'm getting a second turn to talk.
I have somebody.
Oh, can we talk about the board, among the board first, before you open up to the public?
Go ahead.
So, just going back, so we have granted multiple of these easements, regardless of who the end user is. And I think that's what we should think about, my opinion of what we should think about. And because we've granted those, then I think we should probably grant this one as well with no additional restrictions on the easement. But we should separate it from who the end receiver is. That we're doing it because it's a benefit to our community to provide this easement across public land, but regardless of who it is. So that anyone comes to us, if they don't have the spokespeople that this particular case does, we would treat them the same way. Is that fair? That's what I'm trying to, like, I don't want this to, like, I feel like we struggled with it at the stone mill, and we're struggling with it now, and I don't want to struggle with it anymore. Like if we're if this is how we're gonna treat these, can we do it the same regardless of who the end user is?
Can I get clarification on the one that we did down to like Mr. Rupp's? Didn't we write in there that if we needed access to that?
And that is in the revised easement deed, that is
in there?
that if we need to have the utilities relocated, that would be at the cost of Vermont Gas for future development.
Other questions from the board before I go to the audience? Yes.
Yes, without taking any position in any way, shape, or form, I noticed in the Addy Indy that the Vermont Gas officials said they would not take any position on paying for easements until they had talked to town officials. Whether you might want to take a position on everyone pays for easements, or nobody pays for easements, I don't know, but I just asked that question as a matter of interest, given that the fact that there are so many concerns about gas as being a fossil fuel versus it being better than the alternatives. It's just a question, it's not a.
We do have data from the assessor that does provide us some information about Vermont Gas paying for easements for other private, Middlebury College, they've paid Middlebury College, they've paid Catamount LLC, and RC Development. So they have paid for easements to private locations.
Thank
I just add, you know, about the letter that Ross wrote to the board and in the paper, that, you know, I asked Kathleen this afternoon if we could remember the number of entities that the town has granted easements in use of public rights of way, and we lost count. To, you know, even the number of internet companies, we can't even remember how many there are at this point between Fidium and Comcast and First Light, and you know, so there's so many precedents of allowing public utilities for, you know, some of them are just segments of the industrial park, some of them were just individual businesses. The college has a particular internet line, and so it's pretty awkward to say that, you know, public rights of way shouldn't be, and I think public property shouldn't be available where it's not a burden to the town, where we've kept the rights that the town needs to, should we ever need to use that property or use that easement. And I just want to hope that there could be some more, a different kind of approach. And I know that the state is trying to do this through its statutes and the Clean Energy Standard and so forth that will gradually, for everybody, help incent the change. But it's so hard to say, you know, no, you're the last one, you can't. Or to start, and if there wasn't an amount paid, what would that amount to? I mean, the Bill Benton's assessment for, this is like 250 feet, 10-foot wide easement, that's 2,500 feet. He says 50 cents a square foot is the comparable, the rate, so what is that? $1,250. So what's that gonna do in the cause of transition, change, really? I think it's a much bigger, more challenging question. And I just want to reach for that.
I think to that point, what I'm getting caught up on, and I think with the precedent that we have now, I would like to see this passed tonight, but I would like Andy and I to take it up on the policy committee to really start looking at our goals as a town. If we do want to be energy resilient and address climate change as a town, we need to address it through policy and through practice. And I want to see, if not charging Vermont Gas for our lines tonight, sending it as a message, you know, whatever the dollar amount is, you're sending a message to Vermont Gas saying, we're not letting you put fossil fuels into our community for free. And I think that's something that I'd like to address in upcoming policy committee, regardless of the amount that we get. I think the amount for me doesn't matter as much as the message that it sends, that communities want to start addressing climate change.
The Energy Committee certainly does, and they're working with the Planning Commission on the town plan to try to integrate that. But it's a big transition. It's gonna
Yeah.
take time.
And I think a lot of people are uncomfortable with change, and we've made hard change before, and I think we're capable of doing
Like
it.
this. This is huge.
Yeah.
I would just hope that you would think in terms of how best to approach a problem and get the best results from the community. And I think you'll do far better with incentives than you will with punishments. Remember that tariffs become taxes on end users. And if you instead turn to ways of finding incentives for people to go in directions that you think are beneficial to the community, you'll get a better buy-in.
Behind you,
Yeah, I love the idea of the Energy Committee taking up policy and thinking through the future of our town. That would be critical. We've done that. We way ahead of other people. As a church, which has a very tight budget, spent $50,000 on solar. That is a lot of money for our church, a tremendous investment for us, including all of the insulation, all of the heat pumps. It's not as though we're living in some kind of draconian age where we just said, oh, the heck with it, let's just keep up with fossil fuel. We're doing everything we can do to do something in if we could get solar panels on that church, I'm sure we'd be investing in them. We can't. So I'm for that, but I hope that long-range planning doesn't negate the attempts we've made to be energy diverse, I guess I would say. I can't say independent, but to support local energy concerns that are not fossil fuel.
I think it's an important issue, but again, I think this came up with a stone mill and us trying to dictate to a private business what kind of heating system they put in their structure. I think we need to separate this discussion from what the end user is and how they're going to use it, and treat all, so it's I think it's very easy with Nancy and, John, to be here and speak for this, and us be like, oh yeah, we want to support the church, but who comes in next, you know? And do they have the spokespeople? And let's take out what they're doing of the conversation, and are we being consistent with our policy around granting easements in the town regardless of where it's going and how they're using it, you know?
So how can we dictate to people who should come in front of us, who should represent St. Stephen Church? They put two of the best people they have, and other people who apply should do the same thing. How are we going to dictate to that?
Well, I think that may be where it goes to the policy committee, so that when we get these requests, it's not about who comes to the board to talk about what kind, you know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
it needs to be about consistent, application of a policy around easements for town land, regardless of how.
So,
Yes.
here's my vote on this. I think that driving your individual feelings on policy and whatnot, by withholding an easement for one when you don't, and not giving it because it's natural gas, but then giving it for electricity or something else, I think is inappropriate. We're in the job of providing a service to our community and allowing our community to thrive. And we educate, we promote through legislation and lots of other ways the continued improvement of the electrification, the reduction in greenhouse gases. And there are many places that are not well served necessarily with heat pumps. It could be the church, it could be old cut-up buildings with small rooms. There's a number of places, and if you try to do it with one policy, it's going to leave out and disadvantage certain places. I think that as long as it's not adversely impacting others, that it's safe, and that I'm more interested in giving it for free and writing in that we have control over it. When we start selling it, now they have bought a right. And when you want to use that property, it's not so easy to negotiate moving it. And so I would much rather do like what we created for Mr. Ups. And I think whether it's a church, a business, or even a home, that I think we should be trying to help them live within our community and make good decisions. And we certainly have energy committee members that believe there are other routes, and they've been doing a great job of educating us. When I redid my kitchen, I went to electric radiant heat, okay? And I probably wouldn't have done it if I hadn't gotten exposed to some of these things. But it wouldn't have served in my business. My business uses the natural gas because there's not an efficient way to heat the building with electricity. I need very quick recovery when I open big doors. So to believe that one size fits all, I think is probably wishful thinking, and I'm in full support of allowing them to utilize an easement as long as we have the control over if we want to use that land, that we would direct them to reposition that gas line.
I think one thing that would be helpful in the future too, when we're having these conversations, is knowing that there is no other alternative route. So like I think with the Stone Mill project example, because we couldn't come to a decision, they found an alternate route.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the future, it would be helpful. So I don't want to make it easy.
Yep.
So that everybody just starts coming saying, oh, I want to put this here and that here. And, I want some effort made in saying this is our only option.
I agree.
Which I think the church has done in this case. So, that for me, no other option. We've given it considerable discussion, so things that we can apply to an applicant in the future is what I'm looking at.
And we as a select board did vote to give Stone Mill an easement.
Did we?
Right.
I guess I'm not remembering.
Yes, we did.
I thought we did.
But why did they go around?
Because
of the vote?
Because the petition, it was tied up with a vote.
Okay,
And the vote
yeah,
gave them permission also. But they'd already found.
yeah.
So it's consistent with what we've done before.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we know that there's not an
Yes.
because if it's the cheapest way to go,
No, I agree with you.
yeah, so there, so setting some things to, when you're in the DRB, these are the things that we can make comments on. When we're looking at these easements, these are the things that we should consider, making maybe a little checklist for ourselves, so we're not swayed by who it's for.
Mm-hmm. I agree, 100%.
Ross?
First of all, I want to clarify that I'm here as an individual. I'm not here speaking on behalf of the Energy Committee or any other committee.
Yeah.
Just so you know, the history, to make it clearer, there seems to be some confusion. Back quite a while ago, the very first easement request across town land, it wasn't just a general request along the roadways, was out behind the building here. There was 3 of them, and they were granted for free, and there was a petition circulated over 300 town residents signed it and put on the ballot. And at that ballot vote, 60% voted in favor of giving it free, 40% voted against giving it free. A couple of years ago, after that, there was several times they asked for free ones, and you granted them. But the one for the stone mill came up, and again, you granted it free. That was the vote from the select board. Petition was circulated, it was gonna be on the ballot. Before a vote could get taken, they decided, instead of waiting for that vote and whatever outcome it may be, they actually could do it. They were just looking for free land. I mean, as a business, if you could just save money and do something free, because the town's willing to just give you their land to use, why not do that instead of something that's a little more difficult, more costly? So when they realized there was gonna be a delay, they just decided to find that they could do it, and they just did it without needing the easement. And so they're not using the easement to the stone mill that was granted, because they
Can I
didn't need
just
it.
correct you on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
There was some engineering that was going on, and that was determined by the engineer who was designing it after the fact. It wasn't that they knew that that was a feasible option prior to the
Oh, okay, thank you.
request.
Thank you for clarification. So, I think you should grant an easement for the church to get their line. I'm not here to ask you to say no. That is not what I think you should do at all. I credit the church for what they have done energy-wise. I think it's great. The question really is whether we subsidize Vermont Gas by giving them the easement for free, or whether we have them pay the fair market value. That is the issue. As far as I know, we don't give any other fossil fuel companies free easements on town land. Is that correct, or am I mistaken?
Have we ever been asked by another fossil fuel company for an easement?
Not during my
So
tenure.
as far as I know, there's no other fossil fuel companies that ask.
Not that we have a policy, we just haven't had that,
Right, yeah, okay.
Okay.
So,
but they do drag their fuel oil hose over the
I'm
town
sorry,
green.
if you let me finish. So it was stated that Vermont Gas is not a burden to the town. Unfortunately, I would suggest they are. You guys, as a town, we're struggling to reduce our carbon footprint. A policy that the board has passed with goals set to try to make that happen, and the constant use and building out of more fossil fuel infrastructure in town is going directly against your own policy that you've passed in a way, because it's not leading to a reduction. I know some people say that gas is cleaner, but actually, if you look at the science, because of all the leakage, and because methane is so potent with the fracking process and all the other, between the production of it and the end user, the research shows that it's typically as bad as coal, sometimes even worse. So you can still sell the land and have control. You just negotiate a deal with them where they pay the fair market price, and you have whatever you want. Has anyone actually spoken to Vermont Gas? They said they wanted to, potentially wasn't gonna do anything unless they talked to someone here, and I guess no one from the town, no official has spoken with them, or has anyone talked with them
I think
about this?
I think that they talked to Kathleen, and here's the issue. This is a service line. If
Mhm.
we build them, they build the church. We've given other service lines, free easements.
Mhm.
I just don't think it's consistent, Ross.
You're right, and I'm saying that in the past, we have always wanted to give free easements to utilities because they benefited our community so much.
You saying
And
this isn't benefiting our
You're
church?
right, the benefit is less now, because it's
still a
harming
benefit,
the
though.
environment,
Okay.
and, okay, well, that's what I'm saying.
make a
So you
motion.
don't have to agree, I'm just saying that's my
I think
position.
that they're moving
I'll
forward.
second.
Maybe it's not your solution, but I
Uh-huh.
think they're
Okay.
moving forward.
All right, well, it's unfortunate because
Motion.
if, you know, without getting payment, there's a lot of people in town that don't think that easement should be given. And so there's probably gonna end up being a delay on granting it because of that.
Okay.
Unless there's a policy that we have that we should charge for any easement, we have not charged the previous ones before. And just because they came in front of us, you want us to charge them without a policy in place, I don't think that's fair.
I'd like to make a motion. I think we've debated this for two different separate times. So I'm gonna make a motion. I move to approve the proposed easement deed between the town of Middlebury and the Vermont Gas Systems Incorporated for the purpose of installing a natural gas service line to the St. Stephen's Episcopal Church, subject to the required state notice period.
I'll second.
Second. Questions or comments from the board? None, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed? Okay.
We thank you very much.
Can we, as part of this conversation, can we make some notes on like, can you take some notes of like when the next time this comes up, like, we wanna know that there's no alternatives.
Got that?
We don't necessarily wanna know who it's for. We don't wanna know what kind of heating system they're putting in. You know, like, I want it to be a conversation
How do you
that's,
address both those things, right? How do you
Right.
say, you can't know who we are?
and I would like,
Or what our meeting system is?
well,
Who
but
we
that,
get.
but I think that impacts our I think
I think we
it
can have
could
a clear
potentially
policy that can-
have
that
an
can
impact
deal with
on how we are making our decision based on who it's for and what they're, you know.
Yeah. Try and take the bias out of
I,
the decision.
I wanna like,
Yes.
Having some, you know, professional entity working with them on the alternatives. And, you know, like I say, you're funding an energy committee that has money to, an energy navigator program to help. And having them.
so maybe that's one
have a-
thing,
have
like,
a meeting with them to demonstrate that.
has the request, so I don't know, you know, but like, having the energy committee provide some support for the applicant on alternatives, right?
Yeah.
Have they met with the energy committee? Are there any alternatives? I just wanna take the heartstrings out of the
Yeah, you don't wanna
conversation.
be treating people.
Let's throw it at the policy committee to come up with some ideas.
So, just to note that Jonathan Miller is in our audience and he's had his hand up for some time.
Oh,
Should I allow him to talk?
I can allow him to talk.
Jonathan?
Yes,
Hi, John.
good evening.
Yes, good evening, sorry, we didn't notice your hand
I'm
up.
speaking not as a member of the Energy Committee I am speaking as an architect with many years' experience, green and sustainable architect. I agree that the select board should come up with a policy that deals with reducing the use of oil and gas in the community to meet up with what you've already passed, the carbon reduction. That should be given more serious thought. Tonight, I understand the church has done the best they can. I would like to point out that they should have reached out to our committee, and we could provide some suggestions, and we could even point them to some very good consultants. As far as whether we're there yet from a previous comment, in the late 70s, Avery Levins designed his own home to be fossil fuel free and in the Rocky Mountains, and he successfully heated and cooled his building, his home. He's the Rocky Mountain Institute and provides a service for high rises.
Hey,
He
Jonathan?
did the same thing.
Hey,
So
Jonathan?
we're technologically with that.
Jonathan?
With that, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your opinion. Just so you know, we didn't, my recollection is it was town facilities, not the town of Middlebury, we had taken up a goal to reduce emissions. And so you talk about us being in conflict with our policy, and that was something that was debated, and we, so.
Doesn't the town plan say something about carbon reduction, or?
I don't know, I think you're barking up a different tree tonight. We got other stuff to deal with.
Okay.
We were talking about use of town property, not carbon emissions. So, thank you. Are you Ellie?
I am.
Come on.
Thank you.
Thanks for bearing with us.
No problem.
Made her nervous.
Well, thank you guys for having me. So I'm Ellie DeVilliers, the Executive Director of Maple Broadband. So you guys have seen the requests. So we made requests to all of our member towns to consider a donation of some of the town ARPA funds to Maple Broadband. So that's the purpose of my being here tonight. So I want to give you guys an update as to where we are now and what's next for us, to give a little bit of further context to the request that you've seen in your packet. So we started construction in October of 2022, and that was our phase one. We turned up about 25 miles in early 2023, and then we kicked off the rest of our phase one when the ground unfroze and became a little bit easier for construction crews. So starting in about April or May of last year. And then we wrapped up that phase in the end of February of this year, and pretty much immediately started our phase two. So our phase one was substantial portions of Cornwall, much of Salisbury west of Route 7, Shoreham, Orwell, and part of Waltham, and a tiny little corner of Middlebury, southwestern Middlebury, Halliday Road, Three Mile Bridge Road. So that area down there. And then our phase two is sections up in and around Virgins, Ferrisburg, some of western Moncton, a little bit of New Haven, and the majority of the town of Waltham, and then also the vast majority of the remainder of Orwell. So that we started in February, March of this year, and we're actually just a couple of weeks away from finishing up. The final serving area there is about 16 miles in southwest Orwell. So as of today, we have 200.7 miles of active service, and they've been down. Yeah, it's quite a lot for a short period of time. Yep, and then 2,875 passings. So that's how many homes we have passed. We have 330 customers. We did last week, and the stats are updated on Wednesday morning, so I can't give you an updated count, but it's probably around 340, 350, something like that in terms of active customers. So the way that we built this is the original source of the funding that we have is a construction grant through the Vermont Community Broadband Board, and the original source of those funds as well was ARPA. And so that was appropriated by the legislature and distributed by the Vermont Community Broadband Board. And importantly, those funds have been really, obviously they've been tremendously useful to kickstart what we have. We couldn't have built any of this so quickly if it wasn't for those funds. But those funds come with strings attached, of course, as all grant funds do, or I guess most grant funds do. And specifically, we're required to build the unserved and underserved areas of the district exclusively. So that was one of the reasons that we could never consider building out Middlebury as the first part, because our grant funds basically said you have to build where there's not service. So where there's Comcast or where there's other fiber, that is disallowed under the grant funds. And so we have, to date, half our member towns. We have 20 member towns in Addison County, and 10 of those towns have donated some portion of their ARPA allocation to us, including 3 towns where we're not building any infrastructure at all because they're part of our partner, Waitsfield and Champlain Valley Telecom's ILEC, or telephone company footprint. So we've partnered with them where they're building out fiber in those sections. And then the town of Weybridge, where we will be building a small section at some point, eastern Weybridge if needed. So what we've been using the town ARPA funds for is essentially for the flexibility to build areas that our grant funds don't allow us to do. So what we spent to date is some money to build out dense areas in and around Virgins and Ferrisburg and a little bit of Shoreham, where we're not allowed to build them with our grant funds, but there's a lot of houses there, and we felt that there might be demand, and anecdotally we have seen demand. So basically we're doing that to strengthen our business case.
And then, importantly, going forward, we're gonna be applying later this year for the next round of federal funding, which is not, it was not like the ARPA funds that came to Vermont, and Vermont decided what to do with them, and the legislature decided that communications union districts, of which Maple Broadband is, your local, of course, were the preferred vehicle for this funding. So the next round of federal funding is a competitive program. So we're going to be bidding as part of this, and hopefully we'll be successful. If we are successful, these funds have even further strings attached. And so one of the things that we would need to be able to do is, for example, we're still waiting for the map of the final list of eligible BEAD addresses, but the last we saw of it, there are some addresses up in northern Middlebury, around Halpin Road in that area, that don't yet have fiber service. And so in order to get there from where our network is, we have to build through here. And according to the rules of the BEAD program, we can build through here, but we can't serve any addresses on the way. And people on the way might wish to have service, they might wish to have a choice, they might wish to have competition. So these are some of the purposes for which we would be using these funds. So I can answer.
So if you build it with those funds, then you could serve?
So one of the potential uses of the funds would be to, if we're successful in the program, we have to build through Middlebury to get to the northern part of Middlebury and the southern part of New Haven, and we could use the funds to pay for connections for people along the way. So we're allowed to build what's called transport fiber, so the fiber to get from here to there. We're not allowed to put a distribution fiber to serve the houses along the way, or to splice the fiber so that it's ready for service.
So the reason that Halvin Road and Painter Road and Munger Street were not served was the town made a barter arrangement with Comcast, or its predecessor, Mountain Cable, that enabled us to form Middlebury Community Television, get some money for that, and build more line extensions than would otherwise be the rule. They couldn't build all the roads in town. And so the choice was made, and there were some people in those areas who, at that time, didn't want their kids watching cable TV or what, I don't know. Anyway.
Probably don't want their kids watching TikTok now.
It was like, okay.
Mom and dad.
Okay. Well, Victoria Susan DeWin will remember, she was one of the advocates of not, so give credit where credit is due, at the time. Anyway, that's the reason. And so that is an underserved area.
Yep. So
I
one
live
of
on
the things that
Halpin,
probably.
I have Comcast.
Yeah, well, I don't.
Well, you don't live on Halpin.
No.
I do.
So they went out helping.
But I'm only 5 houses out, so
Well,
I
they
don't
might-
know about my neighbors. I
they
get
might have
emails from
stopped.
them, but I don't know.
Because you're not far from the highly developed areas.
Really? I don't see anything around me, but, yeah, I understand.
What is the helper service now?
Oh, it's like 5 or something like that.
With who? What's
Oh,
fair?
it's with Consolidated.
Yes.
Oh, that sucks.
It's terrible.
So, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, a year ago, the Open Door Clinic came to us asking for $2,500 of our ARPA money, and we said no to them.
There's a
different issue here.
Okay.
That's a different thing.
It's different.
We
Okay.
weren't using ARPA funds for all of the health services. We have that in the budget, and that was it.
So I will say, I am fortunate to be on one of the routes where they had to go by to build out in underserved areas, and I was able to get connected, and it is great. And I think anything we can do to help give other people in our town access to their service would be beneficial.
We have committed $50,000.
That was the concept,
Right.
the concept, yeah.
Right. When we divided up all the opera money 2 years ago, that pie chart, it was the last one we added in. It was absolutely the last thing we put in. And we committed to $50,000.
What would $50,000 do in terms of reach in the areas that are underserved?
A good rule of thumb is that the construction, because we have a separate pot of money to pay for design. So that aside, a good rule of thumb is that we can build about a mile of aerial fiber for $30,000.
How much?
Just 1 mile?
Just 1 mile,
For how much?
$30,000. So one of the things.
Really?
I know.
So you went through phase 1, phase 2. Middlebury is included in what phase?
So that's a great question. So one of the things that I should have mentioned by way of context is that our mandates with the grant funding we've received to date, and also a requirement of the next round of federal funding, is that we provide universal service. So anyone anywhere in the entire district where it's on grid and they don't have service, we have to get to. And so obviously some of these houses, if you have 20 houses a mile, that's a pretty profitable mile. Sometimes we have 3 houses a mile. Sometimes you have to go, half a mile to get to the last house. So it seems like $30,000, $50,000 won't get you a long way, but at the same time, if you have densities, we have in Virgins, we've built out 6.2 miles of those dense areas that I mentioned earlier, and the total bill on that is under $200,000. So you are actually able to do quite a bit with a small amount of money when you have density. And so that's exactly where we'll be using these funds, because the more that we can build out these areas that are more profitable that we're not allowed to build with our grant funding, and the more people take up service, that's great for those customers, of course, but also the stronger our business case is, then the less debt we have to take on to reach the ends of the roads, because there's no way that we can build everything we have to build with grant funding. I mean, that would be a wonderful world, and if that was the world, we'd have another wonderful problem of figuring out how we invest in affordability programs and subsidy programs for people who can't afford, which is really one of our other challenges, because right now we need to make sure there's network available everywhere. And then the second thing is to figure out that balance. But I'm actually not going to answer your question. So one of the other things is, again, our mission is to make sure that everyone who doesn't have service gets access to service, so gets main line going down the road. And so that's the number of houses where that is the case is shrinking all the time, partly because of us building, but partly also because of other people building. So when we first started, there was almost no fiber at all in Addison County. I actually have a summer intern now who's working on the history of from 2020, or as far back as the Public Service Department data has by town, to show what the situation was in terms of where there was DSL, where there was fiber, where there was cable, to be able to tell the story over time. But anecdotally, we all know it. We've built, NetSpeed has started to build in areas, of course, exactly where we were building in Cornwall and Shoreham and Orwell. And Fidium has now built out a lot, not all, but a lot of Middlebury as well as Ripton. Doubtful that would have happened in that time frame if it wasn't for the legislature funding communications union districts. But the other thing is that if there's existing fiber somewhere, we don't need to build it to hit our mandate. And so, of course, if we need to go through an area, we want to be able to provide a choice. But our policy right now is to first of all get that universal coverage, and then we can sit back as a district and decide: do people want us to come in and compete? What should be the balance between investing in affordability, or potentially dropping rates for all, or building up to be able to go and compete in areas if there's a demand? Because again, this isn't, one of the things here is there's, call it like 3 to 4 year plan from when we started, not from now, to get everyone coverage. And that's the first win, but the second win is 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road, because Fidium's here now and NetSpeed's here now. Both of those are private equity owned, and so I think we all know what private equity does when there's no competition. So it's not to say that we need to offer competition for every single address everywhere, but we need to be strong enough that we have that option, we have that flexibility as a public utility going into the future. So to answer your question, what we're planning to do is to build to the areas that are unserved and underserved, and anything we need to get through to reach those areas, which winds up, we haven't done the maps yet because we don't know where the final eligible addresses are, but it's just because of the way the pole lines run, it winds up being a pretty substantial portion, like through the central district here and up north, that we'd need to pass, as well as through East Middlebury to get over to Ripton, because there's a couple of addresses over there. So I don't know the percent of Middlebury addresses that we will be opportunistically passing and providing service, but I would wager it's a substantial portion. And that's next year we're doing that build.
So since Maple Broadband was launched, now you have Fidium and even Comcast has improved their output, right? So how do you find, is there a demand for Maple Broadband wherever you're going, or?
So unsurprisingly, where there is only poor DSL, we have the highest take rates. We also have very high take rates in Cornwall, where property values and incomes are a little bit higher. And then we also have very high take rates in, it's not entirely surprising, but in Virgins and Ferrisburg and those dense areas, because where there's only Comcast, sometimes Comcast charges a lot.
Yeah.
And so maybe that will switch as if Comcast drops prices. But those are the areas we've seen the most demand so far, is the underserved areas and then some of the higher income, more dense areas.
So if we've already allocated the 50,000,
So that was your concept.
oh, okay.
So, and that was based on a September 2022 request from Maple Broadband asking for $25,000 to $50,000. So I put them in for $50,000 in that concept. You had also set aside some $262,000 for some project and grants management funding that we did not use, and that is about $100,000 that hasn't been allocated so far.
So maybe if I could just comment on that. So the reason that we put forth this quantum of request now, I actually wasn't aware of that $50,000 amount, but it's available in our annual report. But the other member towns that have donated, most of them have donated in the $50,000 range, some 40, some a little bit less. And so the thinking was Middlebury being a bit of a bigger town with a bigger allocation, perhaps, could, and also more people that we'd be passing over time could potentially afford a bit more. But again, you also at the same time have a lot of demands for your funds, so we would be very grateful for anything you could contribute.
My only comeback to that will be, Middlebury is not going to be served anytime soon from the map I'm looking at here. We are on the red one, which says it's not on the horizon yet. So I'm thinking like if Cornwall is giving money, they're getting service right away. If we are giving money, there's nothing coming up to us right away.
Well, as I actually haven't updated that, we'll be updating that map once we have the new beat plans and once we know if we're successful in that, because we don't want to be promising what we don't have funding for. So the areas that are pink are the areas that don't have service and we know we have to build, and the areas that are red are areas that do have service, and we'll build through them if we need to.
I was just gonna mention that, if I'm not mistaken, I think I heard Representative Robin Scheid mention in her report earlier that all the ARPA funds need to be spent by the end of this year.
No,
No.
Committed.
Committed.
This year.
committed.
Okay.
Need to be spent by 2026.
2026.
Committed this year.
Yes.
Committed this year.
I support you for sure, but yeah, I don't know what the amount should.
It's a tough one. I was on the original EC5 report. I was the Montpelier rep to that board. I was the vice chair of it for a time. I love the idea of municipal telecoms. On the other hand, I love the idea of people living close to work and services and building out the ultimate modern utility in rural places makes those places more attractive and diminishes the value of the downtown as a place that has these modern services. I am paying 30% less than your current service right now for Fidium in Middlebury. I appreciate the competition argument. I think that's a very good one, and I take it seriously. But I am torn as someone who believes that the most environmentally friendly thing people can do is live close to one another, with the idea that rural broadband is equivalent to rural electrification, serving farmers across the state.
I
So,
can't bring my cows into the town.
Right. No, absolutely. I understand.
and yeah. So as a person who has been who had very poor DSL service prior to Maple Broadband, I am in support of supporting Maple Broadband providing service to other. These houses already exist and people are already living there, and we're not gonna tear those houses down. And some of us live where we do because we don't wanna live next to you, Andy. So, you know,
come on.
so, and it costs me more to do that. It costs me more to live like that. But I think I should have access to the same service as somebody who's choosing to live in downtown.
How much is it gonna cost in Middlebury to provide service to all the underserved people? What would be the total bill on that? A lot.
A lot. I don't have a number. I'll
And-
have a number on that in a couple of weeks because I need to.
And how many underserved people are they? I'm helping, there can't be more than 14. Cause that's all that's past me is 14 houses. So if you're gonna spend,
heading north from there, how many, that's in Middlebury, right?
right, well, you can cross over to New Haven.
She's talking about New Haven, the
Right.
line.
All I'm concerned about is
I know,
Middlebury.
I'm just
Yeah.
saying, they gotta hit that road.
They gotta hit that road.
In the same way
So
that-
that's gonna cost, I'm sorry, that's gonna cost a couple $100,000 to get 14 people in Middlebury for us to, just those.
Same way that Heather was able to benefit from the line going past her house to Salisbury. You mentioned, I thought I heard, that serving southern New Haven and through lines. I think we'd be interested in, I would be interested in leveraging this and in a way that isn't just Middlebury, but uses that ability to leverage the lines that you need to serve other areas. And having some direct survey of the people who might be customers and showing some real payback for the investment. If there's time to do that before the time for allocation and commitment, it would feel like it'd be a lot more definite and not just, well, let's build this X miles so we can build, whether people are interested or not. I don't know, can you do that?
Is that something?
Well, I mean, to be clear,
I
the
wanted to
requirement of
stand
our
up.
grant funding we've already received is that we need to build past these houses, regardless of whether or not they want it. And the next round of federal funding is the same thing. Is the goal here is to make sure that everyone who wants service, whether they want it today or they want it next year, or the person who buys the house in 5 years' time wants service.
Well, it might make a difference if you go up Halpin Road versus going to Painter and Munger. I'm just saying, to serve up in New Haven.
So the idea is you're going to build out to serve those underserved places at some point. If you have some money from Middlebury, the people that are in between those, you can offer service to them because you can claim you've gotten money, so they can hook up to it, right? Otherwise, the grant funding says they can't hook up to it, right?
Yeah, that's one potential use of funds, or to build out other areas that are similar, because everything together helps us reduce the amount of debt service and the debt service costs, which helps us be more affordable. Exactly to your point of the services costs, it's something that we're sensitive to that, because we're aware that although we have all this grant money, we're not the low-cost provider. At the same time, we can't be dropping our rates down to compete with people who have much stronger balance sheets and much more density in much more profitable areas, because we've gotten grant money to build the areas that weren't profitable enough to begin with for anyone to build, and we have to be able to maintain those over time. We have to be able to pay our overheads, such as those are, and prices of course are sticky, downwards. So much rather, so that's why we're being a little bit conservative with what our rates are now. And once we've built everything we need to build and taken on all the debt that we need to take on and understand what that looks like and see where our take rates stabilize, we're going to be adjusting our prices. And as I said earlier, one of the other choices that we can make is whether or not we want to be taking some of the funding that we have, because again, as a nonprofit, there's no shareholders, and so whatever is left over, there's things that we can do with that. So one thing is rates, another thing is affordability, because there's a lot of people here who may want internet who can't afford it, and we know that that's the case. Now, surveys around that, I mean, there's a federal program called the Affordable Connectivity Program that unfortunately has ceased to get its funding, but we know that this is an ongoing problem. And we know that, who knows what the federal government will do? Who knows what the state of Vermont will do? But that's one of the things that's under discussion in our district is what can we do around this? So that's something else we're having. Obviously, we can't use ARPA funds for affordability because they would need to be spent. But the more money that we can, the less debt service we have to pay on the network, then the more flexibility we have with the service revenues to be investing in those sorts of programs as well.
give
So
some
do you
people.
need to have an exact dollar figure tonight could
No, we could continue this conversation while we get more information, if you'd like.
We move to have you work with them to bring us back a proposal?
Yeah, and I think we could update the other components of the allocation to give you a better picture where we are.
have a pretty good understanding of what's going on, but I think we're struggling with the dollar figure of how much to allocate. And that maybe if you looked at it and as you said, within a couple of weeks, you'd have a better idea. And Kathleen could bring it back to us and we could decide on, we're gonna support you, the question is how much.
Yeah.
I think is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, which is very fair enough. And we, as I said earlier, we appreciate support in any amount. And so it certainly makes sense to have us do our diligence, especially because we're so close now to actually having a better understanding and a map of, okay, here's where we're gonna be building, here's where we're gonna be passing, here's the estimate of what's going to cost, just so that you have all that context in front of you.
And when do you think you'll have that?
Oh, I tend to be optimistic with my dates. It was a week ago the state of Vermont published its list of eligible addresses, but they weren't addresses. They were federal fabric IDs, which there was duplicates in the data set, and so we're still waiting to get a map, and it's been over a week. So, and then we need to do a bit of design. So, probably about a month or 6 weeks, I would say.
Oh, okay. So plenty of time before December is, and when we need to have allocated or all of our funding, right? Okay. Okay.
So is the board good with that? We're gonna let
I'm
Kathleen
in
work with Ellie and bring it back to us with a proposed dollar
I'm
figure.
also in support of helping you, but we have to decide how much and we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thanks, Ellie.
Thank you.
David,
Yes, alrighty.
you're on the clock.
Now, I'll be
Brevity.
The downside to going late in the agenda is we shorten your time considerably.
He's always fast.
we'll be brief here. So now we got
Well, like hour and 10.
So,
Yes,
this
ma'am.
is a follow-up from the retreat. There was a discussion at the retreat a little while back about parking in the downtown, and a study this town did over a decade ago about possible recommendations on how to make the most of the parking you have available downtown. One of the takeaways from the retreat was to put a little meat on the bone and come back with some more specific examples of what those recommendations might be. And so what I'd like to do is just briefly walk through them, and then any questions you have. There's no decisions to be made tonight, it's just sharing a little bit more and seeing whether this board has an interest in pursuing them.
Well, I think the memo really pretty clearly outlines that, and to save time, it seems like some of these involve ordinance, warning an ordinance to make these fine changes take effect, and having a plan for which spaces are timed which way, and in that time where you have a hearing and a public review, we'll get some input back from people in the downtown as to what they think about it. So if it's appropriate, why don't we just make a motion to authorize you to proceed with warning the necessary hearing changes for these, and we'll see how it goes. How about that?
That doesn't bother me, but I just would, do you have any questions about these ideas, or thoughts or reactions? It would help to guide a little bit in understanding what you're thinking.
Everybody read them?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think you can make the signage changes to Mill Street right away. I don't think that's an ordinance thing, but,
Yeah.
it's obvious. Cleaning the parking lot, sure.
Yeah, the improvements to lighting and
Yeah,
access.
that's low hanging fruit, obviously. The fines
Yeah.
are
It's gonna be expensive.
always something, but
I am still in favor of increasing the proposed.
okey dokey. All right, well, I
More
will.
than what he's asking
I
for?
think that the first three should all be 50. And then I'd do all other parking I'd do at least 30. That's,
You're a drill sergeant. in
well,
formal life.
I think $20. Somebody's gonna say, I go to the city and I park somewhere and I pay $20 to park somewhere.
Yeah.
And they're gonna come here and say, oh, so I'm gonna go downtown and they're gonna charge me $20 to park. Okay,
I think
I-
the parking rules are only as effective as how you can dissuade people from violating them.
right.
And I think if the chief were here, and I know just spoke to the gentleman who's our new parking enforcement, and he had the same sentiment, which is you have to have these higher fines at least to get people to follow the rules, which are the basis of why you have the parking system, which is all designed to encourage the
So
businesses downtown.
we don't wanna put meters in, right? So if people are parking in these high demand spaces and they wanna park there longer than they're signed for, then they need to pay for it, right?
Yep.
And they should pay an appropriate going rate for parking, in my opinion. Or park somewhere else where it's free.
Right, no, I could not agree more, and I still like my idea of a 2-hour violation and a larger 4-hour violation if you're in a lot well beyond the amount of time you should be.
I like that too, but how easily is it enforced is my question.
The ticket's still on there 2 hours later.
Yeah, there's another one, it's bigger.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
You know, and if people want to pay for parking in the high spaces, and we start generating some funds, well, then that creates some money for us to be able to do things with.
When you say paying for parking, do you mean the fine they would pay if they don't move, or actual paying for the spot?
Well, that's what's happening, right? I mean, like,
She's talking about the fine.
Okay, all right. All right, so I guess.
you don't, so to clarify,
Yeah.
you don't have to pay for parking.
Right now, you don't.
But if you're gonna take one of these high usage spots and you're gonna stay there all day, you're gonna pay for it.
So there's gonna be a limit of 2 hours, is that what you're saying?
I don't know.
There
Depends
already
on-
is for most of the downtown.
Mhm.
The issue is your fines are next to nothing, and so some people may view it just as a cost doing
It's a
business.
long time to look at your mailbox.
I'll park there all day for $5.
Post
if
office.
you- Okay, so it sounds like the next steps will
Can maybe bring us back the final fine
yeah.
thing. I'm not hearing consensus on that, and, but I think there's consensus on having more, spaces marked with times.
Yep. It'll nudge a
to the
few
lower
people
lot, like
to a
you
different lot,
suggested,
but
yeah.
also, when you've got one lot at 105% and one lot that nobody ever uses, you're not really using your assets the best way you can.
I think you make a compelling argument for
Okay.
doing it, and a good time is when we're restriping or doing it.
I was gonna say, you're gonna have this experience if you do nothing. 'Cause when
Yeah.
that library project happens, you're gonna change the culture of parking there anyway. So,
So,
okay, we'll come up with the more specifics and we'll come back.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, Dave.
There's nobody else, so it's me. All right, is there any energy left in the room?
Patiently waiting.
Oh, yeah.
It's 8:20, it's time for you.
Torturous. Warn me not to come at 7. It's all good. Thank you for having me. I will make this short and open up conversation. Kathleen, you want to drive the bus, but can I just start with a quick
Go ahead.
update? Yeah, so we've, I think the last time I came before you was January or February. I seem to be, 5 to 6 month updates. The really quick version is everything we are focused on right now is getting to a November groundbreaking. And the parallel tracks of that are permitting, going before the DRB for our final subdivision and PUD approval in July. We're doing all of our design that we're gonna need to get to the point where we can apply for zoning permits. If we get through the PUD zoning process, we can apply for our zoning permits to get to that point. Financing, putting together the last puzzle pieces to be able to get to a closing table. We have LIAC, $5 million worth of LIAC funding through VHFA, which we're gonna pair with a National Bank of Middlebury construction loan to do the infrastructure and the home ownership build. And we just as a group have a lot of things to nail down before we're able to apply for a zoning permit and break ground. Doing that, breaking ground would allow us to start delivering homes next summer. We're gonna be doing modular build. We've committed to that for the townhomes and duplexes. So as soon as we can get concrete in the ground in the spring, the modules will get delivered soon afterwards, and we can stitch them up in a couple months. So that'll start to pop in the spring if we can get to a fall groundbreaking. The affordable rental building, we're hoping to break ground in April or May, so we'll need the infrastructure to get back to that. That would be a 12 to 14 month construction period, delivering rental homes early 2026. And the for sale homes will be, an absorption rate we think we can handle over the next 2 years once we start delivering them. So that's the first 80 units. That requires a lot of infrastructure to get built to do, and all told, infrastructure and those first 80 units is about a $50 million project. About $25 to $30 million of that we've secured in subsidy sources, so more than half of the total development cost of this first chunk of housing that we have the initial path forward on, with opportunities we're chasing as we go to get from 80 to 100 to 120 and keep going. I mean, we're applying for a density of up to 250 units for the DRB. And as a big piece of that is the infrastructure we're going to be building and dedicating back to the town, which is sort of the core piece of the development agreement that I know you guys have all taken a look at and we've been discussing with Kathleen and Jen. And the development agreement, and I can jump right in, Kathleen, unless you want to. The development agreement you have in front of you is sort of two components, right? It's contributions from the development to the town, and then it's also the phasing. I mean, the phasing is important, I think. It's complicated as hell in writing, so I apologize for that. I can walk people through exactly how we came with that. The financial contributions are a little less complicated. Those are dollar amounts and timing. So I will jump right in. I think the sections really that are worth talking about here are 3 through 5, 3, 4, and 5. The first two deal with payments to the town for off-site infrastructure improvements. As we went through planning and design with DPW, well, I guess I'll start with sidewalk on Valley View. Our goal is always to have this be a walkable community. That's why the parcel we're building on and planning here is the perfect parcel for town. It's walkable. It's within a mile of almost every in-town Middlebury amenity, including Mary Hogan, and a lot of things through Butt-Off Acres. There's a 2-block stretch, about 650 feet down Valley View that doesn't have a sidewalk. We proposed putting in a sidewalk there. The first draft of this, as we discussed, was originally, we were proposing to do it. DPW says, well, we've got bigger visions for Butt-Off Acres, and we build a lot of sidewalk every year. Why don't we do it? We went back. The initial scope we got a quote from Masterson for was about $63,000. That was our proposal to contribute to the town's construction of that sidewalk. I'll keep going, and then we can circle back to all of these. The other condition that was identified that was going to go to whether the development was providing an undue burden on town infrastructure was the condition of the pump station right on Seminary Street. The condition, I think, is in an existing difficult situation because of the water infiltration. It comes down, I don't have the map up, but that sewer line comes down from Washington Street extension through the wetlands to the west of the developable area here. We don't tie into it at all, but our sewer line will be connecting to the same pump station. And in big rain events, I think there's a big infiltration issue that backs up that pump station. The condition to be improved is a lining of about 1,300 feet of that sewer main. The value of that being, if you can stop the water infiltration, the pump station can be committed to what it's intended to be used for, which is waste, right? The treatment facility has no capacity issues. It's really just the impact on that pump station. Identified the sewer lining would I think in DPW's position, and I don't want to put words in Emily's mouth, so fact check this with her, but that sewer lining would be able to fix that condition. We received quotes. We received one quote. I think Emily's gotten a few that came in that $100,000 to $150,000 range, depending on what season you do it and how easy it ends up being accessing the wetland to do the work and the manhole covers. We proposed splitting that with the town, so we proposed paying half up to $75,000. Again, not something we're tying into, not something we are going to be touching as part of our project, except that line and our lines both go to the same pump station. Those are the two payment ones on top. I mean, we'll have connection fees and meter fees. That is part of that section 2 is part of the standard fee structure of planning and zoning. Section 5. Has anybody read this? And if the answer is no, that would have been better because I could start from scratch. But, thank you, Fred. We are contemplating, and I don't have the site plan up. Do you guys have the exhibit that was attached to this? There are 3 roads, Stonecrop Road, Barnesbrook Road, Ledgmere Road, that each have a 60-foot right-of-way. And in that 60-foot right-of-way includes the sidewalks, the tree plantings, the road itself, and where applicable, underground sewer and water infrastructure. There are also so that is what we are proposing to dedicate to the town when we're done. There is other parts where we're going to be building sewer and water mains that will be in future HOA owned property, and we'll be dedicating those water mains and sewer lines through easements. And so what Section 5 sort of contemplates is when we will be building and then dedicating to the town those roads, right-of-ways, and easements.
So at length, I finally have it up there for you.
Yep. So I'll just point it out. If you scroll down to the bottom, Kathleen, just to make this clear.
Yeah.
So what you see on this is there's this solid dotted line here on either side. This is the 60-foot right-of-way, and these roads are the pieces that we're proposing to be dedicated to the town once we're built into town specs. So Section 5 walks through both what chunks of that work we expect to do to service certain lots, and then what our obligations will be to get to a point where we can dedicate those to the town. This is broken. When we originally were talking about this program with Jen and you all, we sort of talked about like phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 was just a certain housing type. It was a block of housing that we applied to VHFA for missing middle home ownership opportunities, and phase 2 was the multifamily building that was going to be our low-income housing tax credit building. Those are still groups of financed, but they're not sequenced based on the infrastructure. So we're sort of trying to get the phase 1 and phase 2 as housing types out of all of our mouths, and just talk about the housing we're going to be building around the phased infrastructure, right? And so in order for us to build on Lot 12, which will be the low-income housing tax credit building, fully funded, fully committed, and then the missing middle homes here, we're going to start here, work our way into B1, up to B2, and then go into phase C and phase Ds in the future. And this is all built around essentially what stormwater pond the impermeable surfaces are going to be running to, what roads and sewer lines and underground utilities are required for each one. So this is, without going into now, unless you'd like me to, the components of each phase and what it's going to take to get us the first CO in a certain phase, and what it's going to take to actually be ready to dedicate to the town. This is a sort of a small grouping, breaking up the infrastructure build out as much as possible to be able to compartmentalize and move on when we need to.
Go ahead.
I just, this is a very complex project to figure out. My sense from this is that it would be desirable for, we all want this housing project to proceed as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And it's natural that the developer wants to complete and dedicate as much as possible to the town as quickly as possible. And the town interest is practically the opposite. You know, keep the infrastructure, we want to make sure it works, and you dig it up and dig it up over again, and as you go at the pace you need to. And so it's working that out between that is, and it takes a lot of work. I'm in awe of what the developer and the town staff have to do to figure this out. In my opinion, it would be desirable for zoning to permit the whole thing, and be out of the process of any future appeals by residents who decide they don't like the next phase or whatever, as a zoning matter, and let the development agreement administer this as fast as your funding and the market will take it up. And if it turns out that beyond your wildest dreams, you know, you're not only partway into this phase, you're ready to start the next phase, enable that to happen. We just want to know that when a property owner occupies it, that the water and sewer are there for it, you know, it's tested, and at that point, the cost, if you were gonna pre-sell units, and, you know, no infrastructure, but then there's third parties, and then the security for those third parties needs to be much more. But if you're gonna actually physically build the main infrastructure for those things as you go before they occupy them, and that's in the agreement, then what you're proposing for the 10%, and, you know, not to cover the completion of the as-built plans and dedication, and not to cover a water break, God forbid, or whatever, that is conceivable. It's only if you really get out there and pre-sell units that aren't even built yet that the security would need to be greater, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I would design this to give you the flexibility to foreclose the appeal potential, get out of zoning and make this work. And to me, because it's so complex in the town, and this is needed not just for our own sanity for this project, but for future, having a colored exhibit. What's the town's stuff and what's the homeowners association stuff? Color the water lines blue and the sewer lines brown and the, you know, whatever. So, you know, so that
You should see my
it's clear
set
that,
in
so
my
that,
office.
because
Yeah.
trying to read in an agreement what segment is gonna be owned by what is like, and it's really complex around town, and it's getting worse for things like sidewalks and stormwater, and so, that's my
Yeah.
2 cents worth from my experience.
Well, I think I completely agree with everything you said, and I think what we've tried to do is design with that in mind and try to break up these phasings with that in mind. The third thing you mentioned that we haven't touched on that is on the table tonight is bonding, right? Is what the performance bond is going to look like. You mentioned the 10% proposal we made. I can get into that in a second, but from your point about like, we want to give it to you as soon as we possibly can, and you want to take it as late as you possibly can.
That's a bit.
If everything goes well for us, right, like we'll be rolling right from phase A into B1, into B2, into C, and we won't put the top coat of paving on any of this until we're done with those construction.
So the amount to cover the top coat and you might as well do all the deeding at the end, you know?
And what I've written in
That I
here
don't
is that
disagree.
you won't take the land, you won't take any of this dedicated town infrastructure until we've done the last top coat of paving and there's an as-built survey and the town accepts it, right?
Awesome.
And so our intent is to go as far as we think we can go in one efficient push. The intent of breaking it up is to say, okay, if we have to stop at B1 and we have to press pause for 5 years, for 10 years, for 18 months, we want to be able to do the top coat, finish it off, create the necessary turnarounds, create all the accesses, and have that be a community we can turn those roads over to. So I think we built it to have what you're hoping for. But again, this is why I say section 5 is a little unwieldy. It's complicated.
Another thing that has come up is the town's own inspection of this. I mean, you have an engineer who's gonna certify that things are substantially in conformance with the approved plans. And you know, what's substantially in conformance, there might be more law around that, but, you know, I think the town is paying like $900 a day for its engineer to track what's going on South Street, the water line that it's inching along with. And it's expensive to do that, but it's worth it for the town to have the confidence. And how much inspection is something that, you know, is a judgment call and here we have to rely on the staff, our public works staff, as to how they want to, what comfort level they have with that. And that's a piece that's not really addressed.
Yeah, it's addressed in Jen's preliminary plat memo that by the time we get to final, we have an understanding of how that's gonna work. We've talked that through, Kathleen, Jen, and Emily, and I think we're all at least comfortable that there will always be access in whatever DPW's desired pieces while we're building the future town dedicated infrastructure, that there'll be either a weekly or a bi-weekly time. We're gonna have our construction inspector weekly. We'll have our job sites weekly. I mean, our job walkthroughs as owners weekly. So there's plenty of opportunity to bring Bill and Emily in. It's just gonna be.
It requires a lot of coordination, you know, the time that you go to break the transmission main, to reroute that, can't be a time when we happen to have 20 water breaks in the water reservoir at 5 feet. You know, we're gonna have to have some close coordination for some of those critical changes.
Couldn't agree more.
What are we trying to get out of tonight's other update for us?
This is an update, and I think that the DRB would appreciate some confidence that the select board is comfortable with this update and moving forward to a development agreement after the DRB gives approval, and we can incorporate any items coming out of that approval into the development agreement as well.
It seems like it's up to Kathleen and Jen whether the development agreement has to be final before Jen can write a final plat approval, or if that's just gonna be a condition of the first zoning permit. Either of those is fine. We'll need something in writing as part of our financing underwriting to get to a closing. And so I don't wanna put it to November, but I don't think we need to decide it tonight.
Right.
As long as we sort of have the framework and the understanding of the fairness of the offers and the understanding of how the phasing is gonna work, I think that's the thing that we need to collectively get on the same page on as early as possible.
I think,
Hold on, Heather's got something.
I don't wanna hold us up any longer, but I do still just have a concern about on-street parking, and I'm not sure that that's been addressed, and I don't wanna talk about it tonight, other than I just see some parking lots up there, across from that Lot 12 big building. Is that part that the town is taking over as well?
No.
Oh, okay.
Nope.
So that is not considered part of town?
Nope. Town's 60-foot right-of-way will go up Stonecrop Road and up Barnesbrook Road here to Ledgmere. And so these are just the 60-foot right-of-ways on those three streets.
So
And
when you
then
come up Stonecrop Road to where that thick dotted line intersection is, going to my left there,
This will all be owned by the HOA and or Lot 12.
and so just Bill has reviewed as far as like snow removal in these areas that plan, that's, okay.
Yeah, Bill and Emily have had some good
Okay.
comments about snow.
I mean, I trust that them, I just wanna make sure that we are, that this, taking over this property does not unduly burden the town and snow removal and, you know, so, but we don't have to talk about it anymore. When we get ready to sign it, I just would like to have Bill and Emily's sign off saying they're comfortable with what's being assigned.
I think at that point, I don't think you can say, we say no.
Well, but I think
they
they're-
have been involved in all of these
right
back and forths and sign-offs.
Yeah, I mean, the fire chief, the police chief,
another-
EMS,
Snow plow
DPW,
truck.
everybody has to sign off on our plans, right, to get final plat approval. So they've been incorporating comments for 6 to 10 months.
I think big picture, the DRB has a big criterion, the project shall not cause an undue burden on the town. And typical process is that, well, that hearing's gonna be July 8th, and our next meeting's July 9th. So in terms of the sequence of things, being able to communicate that there have been a number of meetings, that the concept of this is understood, that the general idea of the required improvements and the basic elements that the town would take over, there's concurrence on, and it's the details of executing that agreement, finalizing and executing it, that needs to happen before commencement of construction. I think that's the kind of thing that they would want to have communicated, that can be in their minutes or whatever. Whether Valley View sidewalk 63,000 is the exact right number that Emily and Bill feel comfortable with, that's a relatively small detail in the big picture of getting to this zoning hurdle and positioning us for the final draft to be looked at.
Yeah, and I don't wanna make any assumptions about in-town board authorities, right? But those details are things we've been hashing out with the DRB through preliminary, that's obviously conditions of
Yeah.
of the zoning and something that the DRB opined upon. And we had conditions that we needed to fix for the final submission that we've made and will be heard on July 8th. So, I mean, the big undue burden on town infrastructure was the pump station. And so that's one of these ones that's being addressed. Everything else, the DRB, I don't want to say blankly everything else was I try to run through the other conditions we had to satisfy for this most recent submission. But that was the big one that we found was going to be a burden on an already tough condition of town infrastructure.
I think the board is seeing, everybody working with that, but there was a thing about the letter of credit proposal. Do you want to walk us through that as well?
Sure. Yeah. So we're proposing a 10% letter of credit, as a performance bond for the construction of all these. When we do, a multifamily project that constitutes dense infill, right? That's the type of bonding that we make our contractor do for us, and our tax credit investors or the financiers require. So we're familiar with the sort of 10% structure. I know often performance bonds or towns are higher. This is a different project, I think, for a couple reasons. One, the ability to break it into smaller chunks is exposes everybody less. We will not move on to an infrastructure construction piece until we are comfortable that we've got the sources. It's not spec building, right? The sources lined up to do the vertical construction on it. We have about a $7 million price tag on the infrastructure to get us through phase A, B1, B2, and C. That's a high number in part because of the TND requires a lot of circulation, requires a lot of infrastructure. And we've got, through the work Kathleen and I have been doing together for the last 2 years at this point, about $3.5 million of that secured in federal and state sources, and nothing to shake a stick at. The town's $234,000 contribution to that. So you typically you'd be going into a $7 million infrastructure build as a pure speculation, trying to do it all at once, and then.
You're saying 10% of 7 million?
I'm saying 50% of 7 million we've already got.
No, I mean for the letter of credit.
Yes, that's my proposal. We have a.
Sounds ample.
Sorry?
That sounds ample. 10% of 7 million?
Yeah. Yep. And we would do it in phases, right? So as we come for a zoning permit, we'll have everything approved by the DRB, all the design, everything. We won't have to go back to the DRB that's the point of the PUD, right? But as we come to the zoning permits, we'll come in these phases. Maybe we'll be at a point in November where we want to do A and B1 together, and we would owe that letter of credit on the value of that piece, right? We're not coming in for all 7 million right at the top, but we would be doing it as we apply for a zoning permit for the infrastructure component of those phases, and then those would be retired. We would say a year after dedication to the town. And we may decide not to, again, like I said earlier, dedicate anything to the town because we're going gangbusters and we just roll all the way through.
Well, it's, we used to set it up so that you could reduce 10% of 7 million is 700,000, right? So once you get the big expenses in the ground, the road built, water and sewer, then that can be reduced significantly, and it could fluctuate depending on how much you're biting off and chewing each
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, I think that was how that agreement would end up looking. Towns and developers can make these really complicated, or we could make them really simple. It just ends up being the larger slug earlier on is just a burden we can't bear and an interest carry we can't cover because market rate housing doesn't pencil, and we can't pass along added costs to affordable renters and homeowners, right? We're already showing a gap that we're trying to close by November by maxing out the program contributions to the town infrastructure on this, plus the $3.5 million that we brought in subsidy to build it. So there's really no wiggle room for us in our pro formas to be able to add burden. So one way we can do this collectively as a group is try not to have a huge upfront outlay of a performance bond, and we thought a 10% proposal was a pretty fair one, especially when broken up and retired as needed as we finish pieces.
So do we need to agree on this tonight, or is this just a?
I think Fred had the great basis for a little motion that you did, Fred. It was nicely stated that the concept and the development agreement,
Oh, in his email?
or what he just said.
Oh,
Yeah, just talking about,
What did I just say?
I
don't know.
think just a simple motion that a 10% letter for the sections as they build them out. You wouldn't need to put, if you're doing A and B1, you don't need to have a letter of credit for 700,000, you need a letter of credit for
Yep.
X.
I'm sorry, Kathleen, were you talking about the motion that would be in the minutes that the DRB would see? Is that what you're talking about?
Yep,
Oh, okay. Well, I would move that the board supports the infrastructure concepts of this project as conceptually outlined, and that this would not cause an undue burden on the town, subject to the DRB approval conditioned upon finalizing the letter of credit and development agreement elements before commencement of construction.
second.
Oh, you can have it. Give it to Heather.
Big motion. Big motion. I'm good with the way this is headed, and that sounds like all of the town staff and our DRB are very engaged in it. I'm glad to hear you're moving towards this year's groundbreaking.
Staff, yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Anybody have questions on that motion? Which we were supporting what they're working towards?
Great.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
At the risk of bringing us to 10 o'clock, I will just say, like, working with town staff has been awesome. I mean, we're talking about a $50 million investment in housing in the town of Middlebury, which no other town outside of Chittenden County has seen in decades, or has a path to see in decades. And a lot of that is credit to the college stepping up for the initial investment, and to Jen, Kathleen, Emily, Bill, Dan, when it was Dan, you know, pulling the same oar, and the DRB and the select board.
And credit to you.
Yeah, well, we love this town, and we love being down here for a lot of reasons, and some it was started here, so easy candidate, easy partnership, and we're appreciative of everybody's support. It doesn't happen this way in every town, but it needs to for this to get done. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Just start thinking about what that next project is.
Right.
All
We have
right.
ideas, but yeah. No, we'll get this one
Yeah, well,
done and delivered first. Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
thank
Thank you all.
awesome.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Who's got check warrants?
I do. I went through all of those checks, and I didn't see anything inappropriate, so I would move to approve total expenditures in the amount of $778,258.27, consisting of $657,759.20 for accounts payable, and $120,499.07 for payroll for the period June 12th, 2024 through June 25,
Second.
2024.
We have a second.
Yep, Farah does.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Shannon?
Nothing.
Too late. Fred?
I never would have believed a brake job on a grader would cost $35,000.
That's nothing.
Very
Just-
expensive piece of equipment.
Anyway, it's, compliments again to the staff for the work on this. Complicated, there's a lot of work yet to be done.
Dan?
Nothing.
I'm good.
12 years ago, we could do aerial fiber for $10,000 a month.
Yeah. Carton bag, three.
Anyway,
All right, do we have an executive session?
You do have a follow-up from your last meeting, in executive session, on probable litigation.
yeah, we should do that.
I'll further move, do we have to do both motions for contract or just probable?
just probable.
Okay. I'll move to find that premature general knowledge, public knowledge regarding probable litigation to which the town would be a party would clearly place the town at a substantial disadvantage because the discussion would divulge the town's strategy in such probable litigation and will include confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the town.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. I move to enter into executive session with the inclusion of the town manager and assistant town manager to discuss the negotiation of probable litigation as allowed under Title I, Section 313A1, A1A, Title I, Section 313A1E, and Title I, Section 313A1F.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Man, that just gets
10 o'clock.
wordy and wordier.